Silence after that. But Dad's words of confidence kept replaying in my head. I wanted to fight for a happy life for Sarah. It was the least I could do.
Sarah, I stayed the night at my parents', but really wanted to stay there even longer. I didn't want to return to Maximus's and my apartment. It didn't feel like home, and now it probably would never feel that way. No tiny feet would fill this space with their sounds. No bubbly baby laughter. Nothing but oppressing silence. But people would start talking if they found out I had moved out only one day after our wedding. I lay in bed and stared up at the ceiling. I'd been in bed since Mom had taken me home yesterday. I didn't have the energy to get up. A knock sounded. "Sarah? Come in," I said. My voice sounded wispy and raw. I wasn't sure how long I'd cried. Eventually I'd fallen asleep on Mom's lap. Mom came in carrying a tray with food, her face full of concern. She put the tray down beside me on the bed. It was filled with my favorite buttermilk waffles, fresh berries, and maple mascarpone dip. "Thanks, but I'm not hungry." Mom touched my hand, which lay motionless beside me. "You have to eat." "Why? I'm not eating for two anymore." I pressed out. My throat clogged up and my eyes burned with new tears. I wasn't sure how my body could still produce a single tear. I'd already cried so much. "Oh, Sarah, love, I wish I could take this pain from you. It's one I'd hoped you'd never experience. I know how crushing it is." I searched Mom's face. "Have you experienced it?" Mom sighed, her eyes teary. "Twice. One at 7 weeks, one at 8 weeks. You didn't say anything yesterday." I didn't feel like it was the right time to share my own story with you. I took Mom's hand in mine. "Did you blame yourself?" Mom paused. "I think many women worry that they did something wrong, and that's why it happened. But most of the time it just happens because the pregnancy wasn't viable. Do you blame yourself?" I looked away. I never felt more guilty in my life. More tears filled my eyes as I considered all the times I'd wished I wasn't pregnant from a horrible event, and how often I'd worried that the baby would remind me of what happened. What if the baby had felt so unwanted, it had simply perished? I closed my eyes and let out a deep sob, my heart aching so fiercely I wasn't sure I could take another moment of it. "Oh, Sarah, please don't think you are to blame. Our thoughts can't end a viable pregnancy. Nothing you did led to this. Absolutely nothing." She squeezed my hand tightly. I couldn't open my eyes because I knew Mom's gaze would be full of love and understanding, and I simply didn't feel worthy of it right now. Now that it's over, I realized just how much I wanted this baby, and already cared for it. I shuddered, holding back another sob because I felt like it would wreck me. Mom stretched out beside me and stroked my head. "Let it all out. It's okay. I'm here for you." Mom held me for a while, before I felt ready to shower and get dressed. Getting naked was the hardest because my slight bump was even more obvious that way. Mom gave me some of her clothes, a loose dress that hid the signs of a pregnancy that was no more. "I'm sure Maximus won't mind if you spend a few days here." "I should go back. We're married, after all." The empty ring of my voice scared me. Doubt reflected on Mom's face. It was obvious she didn't think it was a good idea. Neither did I. "If you need me, I'm there for you. You can call me any time, Sarah. I don't think you should be alone right now. You can sleep at the apartment and spend the days helping me clean out the attic." I nodded, glad to have something to keep me busy. "Should I let Maximus know he can pick you up after work?" "Yes, please do." I should have done it myself, but I couldn't talk to him now. I wasn't even sure why I felt angry with him and his lack of reaction. He didn't have any sort of connection to the baby. Yesterday should have been the first time he would have really been part of my pregnancy. Mom and I spent all afternoon cleaning out the attic, where boxes filled with old clothes and toys were piled high. Many of them held childhood memories of my siblings and me. Maybe I would have chosen a few of our old toys for the baby one day. This was a bad idea, Mom said when she saw me clutching an old stuffed bear that played a lullaby. I shook my head. No, I want to feel this pain. It'll be a part of me now. I better get used to it. Mom looked down at her dust-covered hand and swallowed hard. Maximus picked me up at 7 in the evening. I had ignored the message he'd sent me yesterday, but I knew Mom had kept him updated. When I got into his car, I expected him to be mad because I'd just ghosted him and slept at home without even telling him. He only regarded me with a blank face for a couple of heartbeats before he turned his attention back to the street and drove off. My mother packed us a container with her chicken soup. It's delicious and satisfying due to the tagliatelle she always adds to it, I said. The warmth of the soup seeped into my lap and I clung to the container.
That's nice of her. I could have gotten takeout. If you don't feel like cooking in the next few days, I have a few great places where I used to get food when I stayed in the city.
I'll cook. It keeps me busy. I stared straight ahead, even though Maximus tried to catch my gaze a few times. From the corner of my eye, I could see his grip on the steering wheel tightening. I'm sorry, I said when we pulled into a parking spot in front of the townhouse after about a minute in the car. If Maximus hadn't picked me up after work, I would have walked the short distance. He turned off the engine, then turned to me with an aghast expression.
What are you apologizing for?
I shrugged. I wasn't even sure. I simply felt so guilty in so many regards that the words had slipped out. Maximus shook his head.
You have no reason to be sorry.
Maybe he was relieved that I wasn't pregnant anymore. I searched his amber eyes for a hint of his true feelings. Are you happy? His mouth opened, but he didn't say anything. Utter shock on his face.
Fuck. Happy the baby's dead?
He closed his eyes and slammed his fists on the steering wheel, causing the vehicle to honk. I watched mutely as his rage slowly took form on his face and the tension in his body.
Fuck no!
He shoved the door open, then slammed it shut so the truck rattled. Outside, he let out a roar, then punched the side of the truck with both fists. Passers-by scuttled away, obviously scared by his rage. Maximus was an imposing sight at any time, but when he got mad, it was truly frightening. If our neighbors hadn't been terrified yet, they would be now. I swallowed. I shouldn't have asked. I allowed him his rage. I wondered if rage was something I should feel too. But rage at whom? Nature, myself? Right now, I just felt empty. Eventually, he approached my side and opened the door for me. I peered up at his reddened face, at the pulsing vein in his throat. He blew out a breath.
I shouldn't have lost it like that.
He gritted out, not even looking at my face.
But your question... Fuck, Sarah.
He met my gaze.
Of course I'm not happy.
I nodded. Okay. After seeing his angry outburst, I was relieved. Knowing that Maximus wasn't left unaffected by our baby's death made me feel better. He held out his hand and helped me climb out of his truck. Then he took the Tupperware from me. Side by side, we walked up the stairs to the townhouse, then took the small elevator up. My gaze drifted to the bruises on Maximus's knuckles from punching the vehicle. Right above them, on the back of his hand, the word Nemesis was inked into his skin. The god of revenge. I wondered if that was how Maximus saw himself. He followed my gaze to his damaged knuckles and shrugged.
It's nothing.
I wondered if physical pain would help with the emotional anguish I felt. Does it help? Maximus stopped, his dark brows snatching together.
Does what help with what?
Does the pain make you feel better? He glanced down at his bruises.
I suppose it does, for a short while.
He narrowed his eyes at me.
You are not like me, Sarah. I don't want you to cause yourself pain. If you need to unleash anger, unleash it on me.
I shook my head. If you don't mind, I'd like to go to bed.
What about the soup?
Maximus held up the Tupperware container. I'm not hungry. It's for you. When I finally lay in bed, I released a shaky breath. I lightly touched my belly despite the deep ache I felt, reminding myself that it wouldn't grow. How long would it take until this pregnancy would end? I didn't want a procedure, but the wait for the inevitable would be so crushing.
Chapter 11. Maximus. In the weeks since our wedding, I'd made sure I worked the day shift so I was there at night when Sarah was home. I barely slept at night, so I heard Sarah right away when she called my name. I was so stunned to hear my name that I rushed over into her bedroom in only boxers. Usually I made sure to wear at least a shirt and sweatpants in the apartment when she was around. Sarah perched on the edge of her bed, trembling. A small blood stain was visible on the linen behind her, and blood also dampened her white silk pajama pants. She stared at me with wide, shaken eyes. I need my mom. Can you call her? Her phone was on the floor beside her feet. Judging by the trembling of her hands, she'd probably dropped it. Sure, I said, as I crossed the room in 2 long strides and picked up the phone. I quickly called Liliana, who would be over within 5 minutes. What can I do? I asked the moment I hung up. Sarah stared up at me. Tears brimmed in her eyes. I don't want to flush it down the toilet. I can't. The tears began flowing down her pale cheeks. I had trouble understanding what she meant until it finally dawned on me. Don't. We can bury it. She shook her head slowly. I can't see it. I just can't. Sobs wrecked her shoulders, and I just wanted to go to her and console her. Fuck. I wanted to kneel by her feet and press my head against her belly. I wasn't even sure why. I'll handle it, I said. I dealt with so much blood and worse in my life, so I would do this for Sarah. For a long time we just looked at each other. Maybe it was wishful thinking, but a silent understanding passed between us. The lock turned. It's me, Liliana called. Bedroom, I called back. She rushed in, then briefly froze when she saw Sarah on the bed before she hurried over to her and helped Sarah get up. Romero briefly glanced in, but then he retreated with a heartbroken expression. I stayed where I was, only watched as Liliana helped Sarah into the bathroom. More blood trailed down Sarah's legs now, tinging her pants red. I turned away when Sarah got undressed and listened to the sound of the shower being turned on. The water didn't drown out Sarah's sobs or Liliana's words of consolation. I peered up. Sarah huddled in the shower with her mother by her side as water spilled down on both of them. Sarah's eyes were closed, and her head leaned back. The water made it hard to see her tears, but the pain on her face was like a punch in the gut. Blood and water mingled on the marble surface of the shower. I waited silently for 2 hours, bearing witness to Sarah's pain, physically and mentally, and wondered if this was my punishment. I fucking deserved it, but Sarah didn't deserve any of this misery. It made me incredibly mad, so fucking angry at the world. Eventually I stared at the floor because my rage at the universe became like a roaring fire that threatened to burn everything down. When the sound of the water turned off, I looked back up. Liliana had wrapped Sarah in a towel and helped her toward the bed. I took gauze from the bathroom cabinet and carefully picked up the remains of our baby, wrapping them up. I briefly closed my eyes because they burned. The warm fog probably triggered my eyes. I got up and carried the gauze into my bedroom, where I kept a beautiful antique ivory jewelry box with intricate flower carvings Mom had given me for this occasion. I hadn't understood when she'd given it to me a couple of days ago, but now I did. I opened it and put the gauze inside, then closed it. I stared at the beautiful box, glad it was white and not made from wood like a coffin. Fuck. I breathed and stared up at the ceiling. A knock sounded, and Liliana poked her head in, Sarah would like to bury the baby now. Her face was tear-stained, too. She glanced from my face down to the box in my hands. Is it in there? I nodded. It's beautiful. Where does Sarah want to bury it? She doesn't know. There's an old oak in the woods behind my parents' house. I used to go there when I wanted to be alone. She smiled. That sounds like a peaceful place. I'll ask Sarah. Do that. My voice was croaky, and my throat felt dry. 30 minutes later, Liliana and Romero helped Sarah into my truck. She was pale and shaky, but she refused to see a doctor. Romero and I exchanged a glance. After the burial, we'd have to convince her to see our doc. It was still dark outside when we started the drive. I'd called my parents and told them we were coming to the house and why, then hung up before Mom could try to console me. Sarah and Liliana sat in the back while Romero sat in the front with me. He held the jewelry box in his lap. When we pulled up the driveway, Mom and Dad waited on the porch with gas lights as it was still dark. Together, all of us walked toward the oak tree. When we arrived, the sun rose over the treetops, lighting up the spot where I planned to bury the box. I grabbed the shovel from Dad and began to dig into the hard ground. Soon I had to use the pickaxe to make progress. Nobody said anything as I worked on the hole. Eventually, when I deemed it deep enough that it would be safe for being dug up easily, I straightened. Romero still held the box. Can I? Sarah asked, motioning at the box, her chin wobbling. Romero handed it to her. She peered down at it, then up at me with anguished eyes. She took a step toward the hole and almost broke down. I grabbed her arm to steady her and help her the rest of the way. She fell to her knees in front of the hole and slowly lowered the box into it. She touched her fingertips to the lid and closed her eyes. Then she looked up at me with a small nod. My fingers on the shovel tightening, I picked up the first scoop of earth and began to fill the hole while Sarah knelt on the icy ground. When I was done, I released a deep breath. Liliana touched Sarah's shoulder. Come, you'll catch a cold. Sarah gave her a look that made it clear she had half a mind to lie down beside the grave and not get up. I clenched my fingers around the handle of the shovel. Come, love, Liliana said again, and this time she managed to pull Sarah to her feet. Slowly, Sarah dragged her gaze up from the grave and our eyes locked. My grip on the shovel tightened even more at the deep pain in her eyes. Thank you, she said quietly. I gave a terse nod. I think Sarah will spend the night with us, Liliana said. I had expected it, so I nodded again. I could feel Mom's eyes on me, but I didn't return her gaze. You can have our spare car, Mom said. The keys are in the ignition. It's the red truck. I was relieved I wouldn't have to give them a ride home. I could tell Sarah wanted to be with her parents. Romero, Liliana, and Sarah left together, but I stayed beside the grave, supporting my weight on the handle of the shovel. The cold had penetrated my body. I couldn't even feel my fingers or toes anymore, but I didn't want to leave yet. It was utterly silent around us. No chirping birds, no barking, and no sounds from the nearby road. It was as if life had ground to a halt at that moment, and it seemed only fitting. Mom approached me. She was wrapped in her thickest winter coat and Ugg boots, and still shivered due to the unrelenting cold. She touched my hand. Let's go in. I'll make us an Irish coffee and warm up some cinnamon cookies. Dad pried the shovel from my cold fingers. Listen to your mother. I should head back home. I have to work in 2 hours. The ride will be excruciatingly long in rush hour. You won't go to work today. Luca will understand, Mom insisted. I laughed bitterly. I'm an enforcer, Mom. Do you think a bit of flesh and blood will bring me to my knees? My heart clenched at my words, but I kept glaring at my mother, willing my words to become true. Mom shook her head with a sad smile. I birthed and raised you. I held you when you cried when you were little. Don't think I don't see when you're breaking inside. If this was how you just described it, you wouldn't have buried it the way you did. Lie to yourself if it helps you. But I can see the truth. I gritted my teeth and looked away. I turned my back on the grave, shoving my fingers into my pant pockets. Dad gave me a stern look. I'm still the head enforcer. And I'm telling you, you're not working today. End of story. I'll handle Luca. I stalked back toward the house. The sound of steps crunching told me my parents were right behind me. When I entered the house, warmth flooded my body at once. Bacon pressed up beside me, wagging his tail gently, not his usual boisterous self. After kicking off my shoes in the mudroom, I headed into the kitchen and sank down on a chair. Bacon leaned against my thigh, and I petted his warm back and head. Mom came in shortly after me. She didn't say anything and began to prepare an Irish coffee and the cookies. I watched silently. Mom sat across from me and put her hand on mine. Things will get better. You believe in karma, Mom. Maybe this is karma's way of paying me back. Nobody would argue that I deserve it. Mom gave me a stern look. It was a look that made even Dad pause. You deserve happiness. End of story.
Sarah, it was our first Christmas as a married couple. It should have been our first Christmas as soon-to-be parents and a soon-to-be family. Instead, we were two almost strangers pretending to be more than that. It had been 3 weeks since I'd lost the baby. 3 weeks that had opened up a world of pain to me I hadn't thought possible. Worse than the sadness over what I'd lost were the rare moments when I wondered if maybe there was a good reason for it, that it would make it easier for all of us to forget what had happened. Those brief moments always sent me into a cruel downward spiral of guilt. Can you take a look at the brioche buns for me? Mom asked, tearing me from my thoughts. I nodded, opened the oven, and reached for the baking sheet. I let out a hiss and jerked back as searing pain shot through my fingers. Mom immediately grabbed my hands and put them under cold water. You need to use pot holders. I know, I said. The door flung open and Dad, Flavio, and Maximus entered the kitchen, ready for a fight.
What happened?
Dad inquired, scanning the kitchen as if attackers were hiding somewhere. Maximus came toward me, his face tight with concern, and sheathed the gun he'd drawn. To see him this ready to defend me was nice. I was lost in my thoughts and burned myself, I explained when he scanned my red fingers that had begun blistering.
Do you have burn salve?
He asked Mom, who sent Inessa to get it. Maximus searched my eyes with worry and suspicion. I was lost in my thoughts, I repeated. He had been constantly watching me since my comment that I wondered if physical pain would help with the anguish I felt.
Okay,
he said. I wasn't sure if he believed me. The number one reason I'd never hurt myself was that I knew how hard Mom and Dad would take it. After Mom had treated my wound with burn salve and unnecessarily dressed it in gauze, we finally gathered around the dining room table. The lights from the Christmas tree illuminated the room, and the sight of the many presents made Alea and Inessa squeal in delight. Maximus had agreed to celebrate Christmas morning with my family. I wouldn't have minded if we'd split up for the festivities, but I hadn't brought it up. Maximus had been trying to help me since the miscarriage, and I didn't want to offend him.
Is this the first time you've celebrated Christmas morning away from your family?
Mom asked Maximus curiously as we all loaded up on food. Maximus handed the plate with the smoked salmon over to Inessa, who passed it along with a look of disgust. She hated fish.
Yes, I always made sure to be home from work by the time Christmas morning rolled around.
I bit my lip, wondering if I should have suggested splitting up. I didn't want to be the reason Maximus missed his family on Christmas. He didn't need to feel obligated to me. I was happy as long as I was with my family. He met my gaze.
But I think marriage is a good reason for new habits.
I gave him a small smile, then focused on my own plate. I hadn't taken much. I still had to force myself to eat most days. I rarely felt true hunger, but I didn't want to let Mom's filet Wellington with venison loin instead of beef go to waste. It was too delicious for that. Mom always turned our breakfast into a luxury brunch, which lasted forever and stuffed you to the max. Later, we settled around the Christmas tree. I dropped on the comfy sofa, letting Inessa and Alea storm the presents. They were still less restrained regarding this part of the holidays. When you grew older, some of the magic of Christmas got lost, and after what happened this year, I didn't feel any magic at all. Maximus reached for an envelope perched atop a pile of presents and handed it to me. I gave him a surprised look. For some reason, I hadn't expected him to get me a present. The past few months had been such a whirlwind that I hadn't thought about buying him anything. I'd already bought the presents for my family in September, as I always did, because I preferred to be prepared. I really hoped it was only a Christmas card, so I wouldn't have to feel bad over not getting him anything. I took the envelope and opened it. The card was a photo of a collection of vases and tableware from my favorite pottery artist. Her pieces were incredibly beautiful and excruciatingly expensive. I had exactly one mug from her, and I only used it on Sunday to enjoy my favorite cup of Earl Grey tea. I opened the card, and my mouth fell open. It was a voucher for a private pottery course with her. In the past, she'd done pottery group courses, but back then, I hadn't been confident enough in my abilities to book a course. When I'd finally felt like I might be worthy to do pottery in the same room as her, she'd stopped giving them. I supposed she'd become too successful and didn't have the time anymore.
Someone told me that you do pottery, and that this is your favorite artist, so I asked her to spend a whole day with you and teach you.
She agreed? I asked, aghast.
I didn't threaten her, if that's what you're worried about,
he said firmly.
But money can buy almost anything.
I hadn't done any pottery since I'd lost the baby, and even before then, after the capture, I'd only tried it twice and given up both times, practically fleeing the pottery wheel. When I'd done pottery in the past, I'd allowed my thoughts to roam free as my fingers formed the soft clay. I had daydreamed and run through imaginary scenarios of my future. Letting my thoughts run free now seemed hazardous and foolish. Maximus regarded me silently. "Thank you," I said with a smile. It was a great gift, one the old Sarah would have been ecstatic about, and hopefully future Sarah would one day be too. But current Sarah was terrified. Maybe this could be my way of reclaiming the old Sarah. Maximus and I were invited over to his parents to celebrate the next day. I hadn't seen them since the small funeral, nor had I visited their home or the old oak tree. Snow covered the ground as we pulled up in the driveway. Barks rang out as dogs gathered at the fences, some of them jumping against the mesh. Their hot breath created clouds of fog around their wide-open maws. I lost count of how many dogs there were. The last time I'd been here, I hadn't even noticed them. Everything had been deadly quiet. Maximus opened the door for me and helped me climb out. He always did, but usually immediately released me once I was safely on the ground. This time he held my hand and squeezed.
"Are you afraid of dogs?"
"I'm not afraid, but I have a healthy dose of respect, especially of dogs like this." Most of them were huge and muscly beasts with sharp teeth and scarred faces. They had been in dogfights, a fact that made me even warier of them.
"Most of them have a brutal past. It takes lots of work to help them overcome their fears and aggressions."
"I admire you for it. Have there been dogs you couldn't help and had to put down?"
"I personally haven't had to do it yet, but Mom had to kill 2 dogs when I was 7 and Primo was 5. He was playing with me on our playground when 2 dogs managed to break through the old fence. I was up on the monkey bars when they both pushed him to the ground. I jumped down to help him just when Mom came running out of the house. One pushed me down and sank its teeth into my shoulder. Primo and I tried to protect our faces and throat because that's where they can do the most damage. Mom had a gun, but because the dogs were on top of us, she couldn't shoot them. To this day, I don't know how she summoned the power, but she wrangled the dog who was on top of Primo to the ground and slit its throat before she stabbed the dog who was on top of my back several times."
I stared at Maximus in horror. I hadn't noticed a scar on his shoulder, but I had never seen him naked.
She didn't hesitate. Both dogs could have easily turned on her and killed her.
"I would have gladly died if it meant saving you and your brother," Cora said. She stood on the porch behind us, rubbing her arms against the cold. She wore a beautiful teal-colored cashmere set, long flowy pants, and a long-sleeved shirt. That's what mothers do, I said with a small smile, even though the words rekindled the deep ache I felt. Cora came down the 3 steps and loosely wrapped her arm around my shoulders. Come in, it's cold. Dinner's ready. She steered me inside, and I was glad that she'd taken the incentive and bridged the distance between us. I'd worried things would be awkward because of the past. Primo sat at the table, but got up to greet me with a brief hug. I gave him a grateful smile for not walking on eggshells around me. The table was loaded with bowls and small serving plates filled with tortilla wraps, pickled onions, roasted corn, salsas, guacamole, queso fresco, and many more things. We always do tacos on the 2nd, Cora said as she motioned for us to sit down. Growl gave me a nodding greeting. Then he took a Dutch oven with steaming meat out of the oven.
Dad always prepares the carne asada. He's always been a perfectionist when it comes to his taco beef, Primo said with a smirk. Maximus chuckled. It's perfect, Growl said as he put the beef on the table. It smelled delicious. Let us be the judge, Maximus said. This was so different from how we celebrated at home that I didn't feel homesick, which was great. I took a bite from my taco and smiled. It's really good. I wasn't a huge meat eater, but this was comfort food at its best. This is the only thing Ryan can cook, but it's utter perfection, Cora said. I always stumbled over the name Ryan when Cora used it. Everyone else called him Growl because his voice was like a growl due to an injury to his vocal cords, which was still marked by the scar at his throat. The atmosphere was relaxed and easygoing, surprising me. We always take a walk through the forest after dinner to help digestion, Cora said. Do you want to join us, or would you like to stay inside with Maximus? I'll join you, but I'm not sure I have the right clothes for a walk. I was in a satin dress and wool tights. My wool coat was pretty, but not designed to withstand below-zero temperatures for long. I can give you something of mine to wear, if you don't mind. I followed Cora to the master bedroom. We didn't talk as we rummaged in her wardrobe until she pulled out a thermal shirt, thermal jacket, and thermal pants. I know it's not as pretty as what you wear now, but it'll keep you warm. I shrugged. I changed into the clothes, then went out into the hallway where Cora waited for me. Scratching and soft whines came from the 2 doors down the hallway. Maximus's dog Bacon and our 4 dogs are locked in there because we weren't sure if you were okay with dogs. I flushed. Maximus has a dog. Cora pursed her lips. Yes, he's had him for 3 years. I didn't know. And he left him here because of me. Cora touched my shoulder. He left him here because Bacon is used to living in a house with a big yard. He's not a city dog. I made Maximus move to the city. Cora shook her head with a kind smile. He made the choice because he wants to make it work between you. Heat rose into my cheeks. What are you doing up there? We're being roasted in our clothes down here, Primo shouted.
Let's not make them wait, I said, before I actually had to talk about the state of my marriage. Cora and I headed downstairs. Growl wrapped his arm around Cora as we strolled through the dark forest. Maximus and Primo carried big torches that illuminated our surroundings. The soft crackling of the fire gave me a sense of comfort. I wondered if I should bridge the subject of his dog. He'd never mentioned him to me. I felt bad that he'd left him behind to move to the city for me. Your mom mentioned Bacon, I said casually. Maximus's face remained stoic, the flickering lights from the flame accentuating his strong jaw and prominent cheekbones.
He's happy here, and I visit him at least once a week. He wouldn't be happy in the city. Even though he's my dog, he's always been a part of our family, and has always lived in this house, so it's not like he's not still home. I nodded. I was glad that Maximus hadn't taken the dog with him. I was wary of dogs, had always been since one had thrown me to the ground by accident when I was a little kid. Still, I hated the thought of being the sole reason for their separation. Maybe one day, if we ever have a house outside the city, we can get a dog,
Maximus said. I didn't say anything. I couldn't imagine moving farther away from my family. I couldn't imagine ever feeling like Maximus was my family. Not after losing our baby. My heart clenched as it always did when the memory of my loss came uninvited.
"Aren't you coming?"
Growl asked, turning around to us. I had ground to a stop without realizing it, and so had Maximus.
"Let's head left,"
Maximus said. His parents, who had been about to go right, stopped. My gaze sought the old oak that the light of the torch barely reached. Now I knew why Maximus didn't want to go right. I'd like to go right, alone. Maximus stepped closer to me. The heat from the fire banished some of the cold the sight of the oak had created in my inside.
"Are you sure? Do you want me to come with you?"
I hesitated. My first impulse was to say no. I don't want to talk. I just want to... I wasn't really sure what I wanted. To some people, it was probably incomprehensible why I'd insisted on a burial for a fetus that didn't even qualify as a real baby yet. As if sadness could be measured by weeks.
"I'm the last person who wants to talk about feelings. Trust me,"
he murmured, and together we made our way toward the oak tree. As we came close enough for the flames to illuminate the ground in front of the tree, my breath halted. A beautiful wood-carved cross sat atop the small grave. "Did you?" Maximus nodded.
"When I was younger, I spent many evenings carving. It's been a while, but I did the best I could."
"Thank you," I said. "Thank you for not ridiculing my wish for a grave." Maximus frowned down at me.
"Every loss needs an outlet. I hope it helps you cope with our loss."
Our loss. I had rarely considered it as such. That Maximus felt that way made me feel better. I didn't ask what he did to cope. We had already been talking more than I'd intended. Silence fell over us, and I allowed myself to feel the full intensity of my sadness, something I'd fought every day in the past 3 weeks.
Chapter 12. 1 year later. Maximus. I glanced at my watch. Flavio should arrive with Sarah any moment. Since Sarah had returned to college last semester to further pursue her degree in art history, either Flavio or Romero had picked her up in the afternoon and taken her home, in addition to the bodyguard who watched her while she was there. Too many bad memories were connected to me picking her up. I wasn't usually home at the time, as I'd started to work a lot again. But today was our first wedding anniversary. 1 entire year as husband and wife, at least on paper. But we were roommates, not more. I doubted we even qualified as friends. We rarely spent time together, and when we did it was often loaded with awkwardness. I was fairly sure Sarah didn't enjoy being near me, and so I tried to stay out of her way as much as possible. The 2 darkest days of her life were directly connected to me, so I couldn't blame her for wanting some distance. We only had dinner together about twice a week. The rest of the time, she ate with her parents and siblings. We did what was necessary to keep up appearances, but not more. When I'd suggested we go to dinner for our anniversary, she had agreed at once. But even that was probably only for appearances' sake. I blew out of breath, annoyed at my train of thoughts. I glanced at my watch again and reached for my phone in my pants pocket, ready to call Flavio. The hum of the elevator made me stop. The beep of the code being entered into the keypad sounded, and the door opened. My phone rang as Flavio and Sarah entered the apartment. I gave Flavio a nod in greeting, and Sarah a brief smile before I answered the phone. It was Maddox. "We have a lead on where they are," he said as a form of greeting. I froze. "Java?" "Yes, and the bald one, Yevgeny, or what was his name?" "Where?" Flavio came closer, his eyes eager. "In a warehouse in Newark. We don't know the exact location yet, but should be able to narrow it down soon." Sarah was frozen in the dirt room, in the process of removing her coat. After more than a year of searching and questioning Bratva assholes, I finally had a hot trail for the men who had captured Sarah and me. I'd killed many of Jabba's acquaintances and family members, but he'd always escaped capture. He'd gladly pushed everyone into the path of the oncoming bus, the filthy coward. He wouldn't escape this time. "Send me the details. I'm coming as fast as I can. We'll find him." "You should wait for backup. I'm too far away to join you in time. Romero is on his way too." "I'll handle it," I clipped. "Send me the details." I hung up. Jabba would be mine today even if I had to search every fucking warehouse in Newark by myself. Sarah watched me with wide eyes, still wrapped in her scarf and one arm in her coat.
"Our attackers?"
I nodded. She swallowed hard. "I'm coming too," Flavio said immediately. "No, you have to watch Sarah." Flavio stepped in front of me. "Let someone else do that." "Last time someone other than you watched her, she was kidnapped, remember?" Flavio shook his head, but he finally stepped out of my way so I could grab my guns and the bag with my knives and torture utensils. I grabbed the door handle and turned to Sarah. "I know today's our anniversary." She gave me a shaky smile. "It doesn't matter. Go." "I'll make them pay for what's been done to you. For what they made me do." Sarah nodded, then she turned away and removed her coat. I left, and as soon as I was out of the apartment, I sent Amo a text. I wanted him by my side. Then I began running. I wanted to get to Port Newark as soon as possible. The marine terminal was huge, and it would take some time to find the right warehouse. What if another made man found them first and decided to give them a quick end? I wanted to be the one to capture and kill them, and I'd make sure it wasn't a quick ending. I took my old Ford truck instead of my new truck. It reeked of wet dog and the remnants of blood. I only ever used it for shelter or torture jobs. My blood was rushing in my veins at the prospect of getting my hands on Jabba and his men tonight. Nothing else mattered. I'd get revenge for Sarah. I had bought her an anniversary gift which was in a box on the kitchen table. But today's revenge would be the true gift, one that I was sure would mean far more to her. We had never discussed what happened, never discussed my search of our capturers. We'd let silence reign. I broke every speeding law as I headed toward Port Newark, where Maddox suspected the Russians. My old Ford truck groaned as I drove it to its limits. 4 warehouses were on my list, and after searching 2 and torturing the people I found there, I knew Jabba was in the 3rd. I parked my truck in an area that couldn't be seen from the front door of the warehouse. No windows faced this way, so the chances of anyone spying me from inside were 0. I couldn't let those assholes escape. I might never get another chance. Just when I got out of my truck, Dad and Primo came running. I wasn't sure where they'd parked. Dad motioned for us to get down beside the truck. "We need to scout the area first to make sure this isn't a trap," he said. I shook my head. "They are inside. I don't want to give them time to escape. And the assholes I tortured weren't holding any information back, trust me. They aren't aware of our presence, unless this is a trap, which we need to eliminate as an option. We won't turn this into a suicide mission." I gritted my teeth. Hadn't he listened? Dad was the head enforcer, so I had to follow his commands, even when his orders didn't sit well with me. Or at least I had to pretend I was following them. Dad narrowed his eyes at me, and I groaned. "All right. As long as I get to kill them in the end, I suppose I can wait. Should we split up?" Dad nodded. "You 2 go together. I'll be on my own." "That's not a good idea," I said immediately. I didn't want to have Primo with me. He would play the voice of reason, but I just wanted to get inside. "Bullshit. Let's make this as effective as possible and each go alone. I don't want to waste more time than necessary scouring the area." Dad regarded me closely as if trying to determine if I was up to something. Eventually he nodded. He handed Primo and me pagers. Give us an update if you find something. We'll meet here in 15. I took the pager, then turned and hurried around to the back of the warehouse, not giving Dad the time to change his mind. I stuffed the pager inside my pants and took my gun instead before I approached one of the smaller side doors of the building. It wasn't secured by a keypad, but that didn't mean it wasn't protected. Maybe it gave off a signal as soon as it was opened. Holding my breath, I pushed down the handle and opened the door about an inch, waiting briefly for an alarm that didn't come. I stepped inside and closed the door without a sound, then listened for any noise. The low hum of male voices carried over to me. I followed the sound toward a few crates and huddled behind them. Peering over them, I saw Java, Yevgeny, and a third man I didn't know at a table, playing cards as if they had no bother in the world. My anger exploded in my chest. I was ready to ambush the three on my own. A hand clamped down on my shoulder. Tension shot through me, and I whirled around, grabbing the arm to break it when I came face to face with Romero. "It's me," he murmured. I released a tense breath and let go of his arm. "Maybe announce yourself next time. I could have killed you. An attacker could have killed you too. You weren't vigilant. Let's not be stupid because we want revenge. If we get killed by those men, we definitely won't avenge Sarah." I nodded. He was right. I had to think before I acted, even if all I wanted was to become a mindless, bloodthirsty monster and destroy those men. They soon began sniffing their own drugs and got more and more boisterous. A sound behind us made Romero and me whirl around with pointed guns. Almo, Dad, and Primo were behind us. They came to our side. Dad's expression made it clear that he wasn't happy with me, but I knew he would have shown little restraint if someone had hurt Mom. At a sign from me, we attacked the drug Bratva assholes. It took immense control not to kick their asses right away. I wanted to take my time and let the effects of the cocaine wear off a bit. When Jabba recognized my face, he grinned dirtily. I almost lost my shit. I'd make him cry and beg later. We took all three to my family's dog sanctuary. When Almo and I carried Jabba to one of the kennels at the end of the premises, his frightened gaze took in the snarling dogs jumping in their cages. He probably thought I'd let the dogs have a go at him like the Bratva often did with enemies. But these dogs had seen enough blood in their lives. Besides, I would do far more damage than them. I'd take my fucking time and make it worthwhile. When I threw Jabba to the dirty ground of the kennel, he scuttled to the back and sneered at me. I could see the fear in his eyes, but he was trying to put on a show. People like him often did, until you peeled away every layer of their charade and revealed them for what they really were. Weaklings. "I hear you married sweet Sarah. I'm honored that I was present when you consummated the marriage in advance. Has the sex gotten any better?" He cackled. I stormed forward and grabbed his throat. "If this is your attempt to provoke me into rash actions, it won't work. I dreamed about torturing you for a year. I won't rush anything tonight." I swallowed hard because being so close to him, it actually took more restraint than I'd thought not to crush his throat right away. "Sarah and I lead a happy marriage, so thank you for setting it up. I would have never gotten her without your help." I straightened before Jabba could see the lie in my eyes. Luckily, he didn't know me well, but Almo's face and that of Romero, who had joined us too, showed me they knew the lie. I avoided their eyes. "Romero and I do the torture alone today." Almo nodded. "If you need me, I'll be in the house." Primo and Dad brought the two others into neighboring kennels. "Let's start with him," I said, nodding toward Yevgeny. "I want Jabba to see what awaits him." Romero and I left Jabba's kennel and went to the one beside him that harbored Yevgeny. Dad handed me my bag with the torture utensils that I'd left in the truck. I unfolded it and hung it up on a hook at the top of the kennel. The instruments gleamed beautifully in the artificial light of the gas lamps. Knives, scalpels, pliers, screwdrivers, needles, hammer, cheese grater, and many more things I'd come to like over the years of working as an enforcer. Soon screams filled the night. Sweat trickled down my face and back. The cold of the outside hardly registered as I worked with Romero to avenge Sarah. We didn't kill Yevgeny. After 2 hours of torture, we decided to move on to Jabba. He'd watched for long enough. He tried to put up a tough front, but one look into his eyes told me he was wrecked by terror of what was next. As he should. Jabba fought against his restraints when I grabbed his arms and pulled him toward a hook that hung from a ceiling of the cage. I fastened the restraints around his wrist to the hook and pulled Jabba into a standing position. I stepped very close to him and bared my teeth. I'll enjoy every second of this. Romero came up beside me with pliers in his hand. I've never had a chance to use these. I motioned for him to go first while I grabbed a small drill. Jabba screamed when Romero began with the first toenail. My heartbeat slowed. Maybe tonight wouldn't bring me peace or absolution, but it would get me as close as I could ever get. We tortured the 3 Bratva assholes until the sun rose. Jabba took his last breath without ever seeing the beauty of another sunrise. When I returned to the house, cold and covered in blood, but feeling a sense of peace I hadn't in a while, Mom, Dad, and Amo awaited me. Mom handed me a strong coffee, which I took upstairs to the bathroom. I showered for a long time, but not because I felt the need to wash off proof of what I'd done. This time, I would have loved to bask in their blood for days if that were possible, but I needed to wash away the remnants of the fury and bloodlust. I wanted to see Sarah as soon as possible. When I came downstairs, only Mom was there.
Romero returned home. Amo, your dad, and Primo are cleaning the kennel. You should lie down for a few hours. You have to be exhausted.
I need to see Sarah. Mom got up and touched my cheek.
She's with her family. And trust me when I say that you should wait a bit before you face her. One shower doesn't wash away hours of what you've done.
I knew she meant it figuratively, because there wasn't a hint of blood on me anymore. I've done this before. I'm fine.
No. This was personal in a way that affects you more than you want to admit. Take a few hours to rest. Sarah will understand.
I decided to listen to my mother and lay down for 2 hours. When I woke, I texted Romero, telling him I would pick up Sarah in about an hour. When he wrote back that she was at Barnyard, I was stunned. For some reason, I had thought she would wait for my return, eager to hear about the revenge I'd sought on her behalf. That she had gone to college as if it were a day like any other didn't sit right with me. Gritting my teeth, I went downstairs, glad to find Almo still around. Together, we hit the gym after breakfast, and I listened to Almo's decision to divorce his bitch of a wife, Cressida, to be with the woman he truly loved. It was a good distraction from my own thoughts. When I returned home in the late afternoon, the 2 bodyguards in front of our door told me that Sarah was already there. I found her in the kitchen stirring her delicious lasagna soup in a big pot. She was humming an unfamiliar tune and wholly immersed in the task. I cleared my throat, and her relaxed demeanor evaporated.
"Oh, you're back,"
she said. Was she happy to see me? I would have come earlier, but your dad told me you were at class.
"I had courses."
I thought you might not go. She frowned as if that didn't make sense.
"Are you hungry?"
"Starving." She filled a bowl with steaming soup and set it down on the table. My present was still there, unopened. They got what they deserved. I made them pay tenfold. I hope that makes you happy. She stared at me in confusion.
"Happy? Because they're dead?"
Are you not? I thought that's what you wanted.
"I wanted them to be gone, so they couldn't hurt anyone ever again.
but it doesn't make me happy. I wondered if she wasn't happy about the revenge I'd taken because there was one more person who needed punishment in her eyes. Me. Even if I hadn't done it out of my own free will, I had been the one who'd hurt her. She sat across from me with a bowl of soup for herself. "Happy belated anniversary," I said, trying not to let my frustration show, though it was hard. Why couldn't she see that I had done this for her, so she could move on?
"Oh, yes."
She glanced at the parcel.
"Happy anniversary. I didn't think we'd celebrate."
I laughed bitterly. "We have no reason to. You're right. But I got you something. You don't have to open it if you don't want to." She flushed and reached for the package, then opened it. Inside was a teacup from the pottery artist she liked, plus a voucher so she could buy whatever else she liked.
"Thank you."
"You can put it with the voucher I gave you last Christmas." She still hadn't used that one either. She regarded the cup for a moment before she met my gaze.
"Thank you for this. And for last night."
I gave a terse nod. We ate in silence after that, and I wondered where we'd go from there. Maybe I'd foolishly hoped getting revenge would wipe the slate clean, that it would mean a new start for our marriage. But Sarah's reaction made it clear that it wouldn't. Maybe I should stop thinking it ever would, and just return to living the life I had before Sarah.
Chapter 13. Sarah. The dress I'd picked for the wedding of the year between my cousin Amo and the daughter of the Cora Capo, Greta, was looser than I'd liked. It was a beautiful dark red dress with a cowl neck, flared skirt, and shimmery red flowers on the skirt. The waist was slim, but it was still too loose for me. I had bought the dress only 4 weeks ago, but I must have lost more weight than I thought in the meantime. A knock sounded. "You can come in." The door opened and Maximus poked his head in. He wore nice light gray chinos and a white dress shirt. He wasn't the suit type, though I actually liked how he looked in it. His eyes slid along my body.
"You look beautiful."
"Thank you." His eyes drifted from my protruding collarbones to my sharp elbows and thin hands. I shifted. I knew my weight loss was obvious. Mom had already asked me about it. The wedding guests today would notice too. I hated to draw attention to myself. If this wasn't such an important social event, I would have found an excuse not to go. I wished I'd picked a dress with more coverage. Maximus immediately tore his gaze from me.
"We need to go."
The tension in his voice was unexpected. I grabbed my small dark red purse and followed him out of the apartment. He didn't say anything on the way to church, and neither did I. I'd often felt exhausted in the past few weeks, too exhausted to make an effort with Maximus. I knew my lack of nutrients was the reason behind it, too. When we arrived at church, Maximus put on his jacket. As Amo's made man, he was expected to wear it. Of course, that also meant I had to sit in the front row. My family, even if closely related to Amo, sat in the second row since the first row was already full. I smiled briefly at Marcella, trying not to look at her huge belly. She was due soon, and the sight of her pregnancy felt like a stab every time. I was happy for her, I truly was, but the pain I felt whenever I saw someone pregnant or with a baby was still intense. I'd avoided my cousin because of it, and I was sure she knew. She gave me a kind smile as I walked past her to sit beside Valerio, who greeted me with a grin.
"Any bets on who's going to cause a scandal?"
I chuckled. That was typical Valerio. "I think there's a lot of potential gathered here today." Valerio nodded. To be honest, I was glad for any kind of distraction as long as people didn't pay attention to me. Mom had assured me that talk about Maximus and me had died down, and I didn't want it to start again. The music began playing, and a hush fell over the crowd. I turned toward the bride. Greta was gorgeous in her dress, and her limp wasn't noticeable at all. Maximus had encouraged me to spend time with her now that she would be living in New York, and maybe I would. Her trauma was different from mine, but that didn't mean we couldn't bond because of it. When Greta reached the front, her gaze locked with Amo, and my belly tightened at the sight of their blatant adoration and love for each other. This wasn't a marriage of convenience. This was pure love. I'd never expected a love marriage. But the marriage Maximus and I currently led was far less than I'd hoped for. It was mostly my fault. I avoided him as much as possible and never joined him when he helped out at the shelter on weekends. He even suggested we could spend time doing other things, but I'd pretended I needed to help Mom with my younger sisters or study for college. Neither was true. He eventually stopped asking. The only time we spent together was in the morning when we both had coffee and in the evening after Maximus got home. Maybe 15 minutes altogether every day. Maximus had dinner at work because I told him I ate with my parents and siblings, which wasn't the case. I simply wasn't hungry in the evenings. The last wedding I'd attended had been my own. I didn't have many happy memories about it. Witnessing Amos and Greta's interactions throughout the festivities, I felt a deep longing inside me, a longing for a love of my own. I wasn't delusional. It was highly unlikely that Maximus and I would ever love each other, but I wanted a different kind of love in my life, the love of a child. Just thinking about my wish made me feel guilty and anxious at the same time. My eyes sought Maximus. He was talking to Matteo. I had spent most of the wedding chatting with Isabella and Aurora. Would Maximus agree to a baby? And then another question popped in my head. How would we even do it? Maximus and I didn't even share a bed. We hadn't shared any intimacy since we'd married. And the one intimacy we'd shared before was the reason I was anxious to consider being with him on a physical level. Maximus hadn't given me any reason to fear him in our marriage, but I knew memories from the past would undoubtedly emerge if I was intimate with him. Yet, I didn't want to use medical help unless necessary. I wanted this baby to be conceived the natural way. This time I wanted to do everything right. Maximus glanced my way. I flushed because I wasn't sure how long I'd been staring at him. Concern crossed his face. I forced a small smile to assure him I was fine. From an outsider's standpoint, Maximus was an attractive man. I didn't doubt that many women wouldn't have any problems jumping in bed with him. If I was being honest, I had been attracted to him when he'd picked me up from college before we got kidnapped. But I had never allowed myself to see him that way again, from fear of opening old wounds. Now I'd have to face those fears if I wanted to become a mother and try to see Maximus as the man I'd been attracted to again, and not a memento of our past trauma.
Maximus. Sarah kept throwing glances my way during our weekly shared dinner. I wasn't sure what the problem was. I finally met her gaze when I couldn't stand the silence anymore. "What's going on?" She flushed. "Nothing." I put my fork down and sat back. I was done with this. Our marriage had never been good. But since I'd killed our attackers, it had become disastrous. The way you're looking at me is not nothing. Was she angry because of how I'd handled the revenge on Jabba and his men? I'd killed another one of the assholes involved in the kidnapping only a couple of weeks ago. But again, Sarah's reaction to the news had been lackluster. I didn't think you'd want to be present during the torture. They got what they deserved. Your dad and I made sure of it. She grimaced. "I know. You were very busy with revenge." "I thought you wanted revenge." She stood with a look of disappointment. "You got your revenge. For you, it's over. But for me, it's not." It was obvious she wanted to end the conversation, but I couldn't take all these unspoken accusations anymore. It was slowly killing me. "I'm here," I growled as I stepped in her way. "You can do to me whatever you want. Fuck. I can give you an array of tools you can use to torture me and get the revenge you deserve." Sarah's eyes brimmed with confusion and shock. She touched her lips with her fingertips, obviously stunned into silence by my words. "Just say the words. I'm yours. If causing me pain helps you heal, do it. Just fucking do it. Nothing's worse than this fucking charade of a marriage we're in." She swallowed hard and looked away, her dark brows pulled down in a harsh frown.
"I never wanted to cause you pain."
She tried to walk past me again. "Why not?" I stepped in front of her, so fucking tired of tiptoeing around the elephant in the room. "I hurt you, so now you should hurt me." She tilted her head up and met my gaze. It was the first time we really looked each other in the eyes for more than a fleeting moment. Tears shone in her brown eyes. My stomach tightened at the sight. Nothing hit me harder than the sadness in my wife's eyes. It was the fucking worst torture in the world. So whatever pain Sarah wanted to cause me would never measure up to one look from her.
I'm not angry with you.
Rage flooded me. How could she say that? What a load of crap. I'm fucking mad at myself, and you have to be too.
Don't tell me what I'm supposed to feel,
she hissed, her face flashing with fury. I straightened in surprise. I'd never seen Sarah furious. She was always poised and gentle-minded, the very opposite of me.
Maybe your anger is the problem, but don't make it out to be my issue. I'm not angry with you.
But you can't stand my presence either, I accused. Maybe I preferred her anger. It was better than Sarah's usual indifference. She let out a sigh but didn't contradict me.
If you really want to help me heal, help me become a mother. I want nothing more than a baby.
I was completely taken aback by her request. Since we'd lost our unborn child and could barely be considered husband and wife, I'd put any thought of us becoming a family out of my mind. My life had centered around brutal revenge. You want a baby from me?
You're my husband.
Ah, yes. She wanted a baby from her husband. Not really me. Because I wasn't the man she wanted at her side. Just the man she had to tolerate. I worried about what it would do to Sarah if we lost another child. What if she had another miscarriage? And that was only the tip of the iceberg of my worries. Sarah, what we have can hardly be considered a marriage. We don't talk, and we rarely see each other. You avoid me as much as you can. Do you really think this is an environment for a child? Not to mention that we didn't even share a bed. Fuck. Did she realize I might have to touch her if she wanted a baby?
We married because I was pregnant. We didn't have any kind of relationship back then either. Nothing changed.
Because we didn't try to change it. I gritted out. I had tried in the beginning, but eventually gave up. It wasn't my place to push Sarah, even if our broken marriage frustrated me. Tears glistened in her eyes.
All I want is a baby. Will you help me?
How could I say no? If that's what you really want, then I'll help you in whatever way you need. She swallowed and released a small breath, then tugged a hair behind her ear and gave me a nervous look.
I ovulate in 2 days.
It took me a moment to understand what she meant. Wow. She really waited until the last moment to bridge the subject. How do you want to do it? I asked matter-of-factly. I tried to keep my emotions out of it. It was an absurd question, but I couldn't imagine Sarah wanting to conceive in the natural way. Fuck, I wasn't sure I even wanted to try. For our marriage, a sterile in vitro fertilization or whatever it was called would be best. She swallowed.
I'm doing ovulation tests, so when my hormone levels spikes, it would be necessary for us to be intimate. Maybe one time will work like last time.
She fell silent. Like last time. I didn't want any of our future sexual encounters to be anything like that nightmare. I wanted to make up for the shit show she'd suffered through her first time. But for her, sex with me was a necessary evil she'd endured to get what she wanted. A baby. I couldn't even blame her. Why would she want to be intimate with me for any other reason? I hadn't dared imagine being with Sarah like that again, and had stopped my mind every time it had wandered there when I'd seen her in pretty clothes. You really want to try the natural way? I asked tightly. I hadn't even seen her naked or in underwear since our capture. Having sex was quite a leap for us. Her cheeks reddened, and she looked away. I hated it when she avoided my eyes.
If you can do it.
I wasn't sure what she meant by it. If that's what you want. I didn't think it was a good idea. What if it ripped open old wounds that hadn't even fully healed yet? Sarah had already lost so much weight. I worried what this would do to her. She gave a terse nod.
It is.
Then we'll do it.
I have another request. I know it's a lot to ask for, but if things go as planned, it might only be for a very short time.
I raised my eyebrows in confusion.
Can you please not be with any other women as long as we have to be intimate?
I clenched my jaw and turned sideways, glaring at nothing in particular.
I know it's a lot to ask.
Damn it, Sarah, I muttered, turning back around to her. I couldn't fucking believe her. That's what you think of me? Yes. That I've been fucking other girls all this time? She blinked up at me and swallowed hard.
We weren't intimate. And I know you and Amo used to be wild.
I nodded grimly. Used to be. I raised my finger with our wedding ring. Before I put this on, maybe our marriage is hardly that. Maybe it's mostly for show. But my parents taught me to honor marriage, so that's what I'm doing.
I'm sorry for insinuating you weren't faithful,
she said quietly. I gave a terse nod. I was done with this conversation. Is there anything else you want from me?
No.
Then everything's settled. In 2 days we'll be intimate. Hopefully you'll get your baby so we won't have to repeat it. She left the kitchen and headed for her room. Soon after, I heard retching in the flush of the toilet. I sagged against the kitchen counter and closed my eyes. If the mere thought of sex with me already made her feel sick, trying to get her pregnant was going to be a nightmare.
Chapter 14. Sarah. My belly clenched violently, but only bile left my mouth. I sat back on my haunches and closed my eyes. Gathering the courage to ask Maximus for a child had taken a toll on me. His reaction had been the one I'd been dreading. It was obvious he didn't want to touch me again. I still remembered his disgusted expression in the cell afterward. Was it that? Did the idea of touching me again disgust him? I sighed. In the aftermath, especially in the first few weeks after the incident, I'd been disgusted by my body. I'd barely been able to touch myself, not even to clean in the shower. I felt better now, most days at least, but today, the memories from that day echoed particularly loud, and I couldn't silence them. I wanted children. That was my motivation. Even if the process to get them would be hard, I'd go through with it. Maybe I should have broached the subject of having children sooner. After a year of my silent retreat from him, Maximus must feel steamrolled by my sudden request. I considered going back to dinner to apologize, but gathering the courage to talk to Maximus and then throwing up had taken a toll on me physically and mentally, and I simply couldn't muster up the energy. I hadn't been hungry all day, and now I felt positively nauseated by the idea of putting food into my mouth, so I couldn't even return to finish my meal. Maximus didn't come to see me. He never did. I wasn't sure if he simply didn't care how I felt or if he preferred to pretend everything was fine. Maybe it made things easier for him. I wasn't even sure I wanted him to try consoling me. We still felt very much like strangers. And he was probably angry because I'd suggested he slept with other women, but it had never even crossed my mind that he might not. He had been a very sexually active man before our marriage, and now he didn't have any sex at all. My guilt increased. Maybe Maximus had been so clipped because I'd hurt his feelings with my words. He always appeared so strong and unfazed that I often forgot that he had feelings too. I needed to talk to someone. I picked up my phone and called Isa. She picked up after the second ring. We had never been super close, not like good friends. We had been too different. But since my capture, Isa and I had begun spending more time with each other. Even if our experiences weren't quite the same, she too had experienced trauma through captivity. I admired the way she handled it, with her usual dose of sarcasm and stubbornness. I hope you have a good reason to call. I'm currently writing a very satisfying murder scene, she muttered in typical Isa style. Oh, I didn't mean to disturb you. I can call Bull, she interrupted me harshly, then continued in a softer voice. I can hear you're upset. Do you need me to come over? I swallowed, tears welling up in my eyes. Talking to you on the phone is good, Isa had more freedom than many Mafia girls of her status, but since her kidnapping, her dad Matteo had definitely upped her protection a lot. I didn't want to cause her trouble. Okay? What happened? I told her of my conversation with Maximus. I hadn't mentioned my decision to ask Maximus for a child with anyone. She was silent for several heartbeats before she said, Maximus is a tough guy, but even tough guys have things they can't brush off. That day probably still haunts him, so he might be anxious about taking the next step in your marriage. I bit my lip. Hearing Isa confirm that I had ignored Maximus's feelings made me feel horrible. And maybe it would be a good idea to work on your marriage first before you try to be intimate? Deep down, I knew Isa had a valid point, but the idea of waiting years, because considering the state of our marriage, that wasn't an unlikely time frame to fix our problems, for a child increased the ache in my chest to unbearable dimensions. You'll be a great mom, Isa assured me after a while. But do you really think you can go through with having sex with Maximus? You haven't been intimate with him since that day. Maybe you should at least try to build up to sex, kiss and fool around a bit, learn to feel comfortable with his touch, and enjoy your body again. How could she sound so poised and grown up when she was 3 years younger than me? That's why I'm glad we're chatting on the phone. You'd laugh at how red my face is. I sighed. I don't think that would work. I don't think it's something Maximus wants. Have you asked him? No, I whispered. Then you can't know. Let me ask another question. What do you want, apart from a baby? I don't know. I'm not sure I can ever be with him without being reminded of that day. Not if you don't try. You have to take action. Replace the bad memories with good ones. Is that how you've handled your kidnapping? I don't see my capturers on a daily basis. But now that there's peace and that Amo and Greta are married, you will see them more often. I know, she said tightly. I let the whole thing bother me for too long, allowed it to darken my days and nights. That's over. I'm giving fate the finger and taking life into my hands. Maybe that's what I'm doing by deciding to have a child. Sex isn't important to me. It is, just not in a good way, she contradicted. I spent half the night thinking about Isa's words. I had never asked Maximus what he wanted, maybe because I was terrified that he didn't want children. I wasn't sure I could ever be happy again without filling the void the pregnancy loss left in my chest. Maximus was in the kitchen, leaning against the table, his coffee and his cell phone in his hands. He looked up when I entered and gave me a tense smile before he returned his attention to the screen. Even on good days, we hardly talked during our morning coffee, and today was far from good. I poured myself a coffee, Maximus always cooked enough for the two of us, and moved toward the table. Maximus made room so I could sit down, but instead, I leaned against the table beside him, something I'd never done. I would have preferred to sit down, but I had a feeling Maximus didn't feel like sitting down. I took a sip from my coffee. The scent of the coffee mingled with Maximus's crisp aftershave. What are your plans for the day? I asked, cringing at how forced it sounded. Maximus put his phone in his pocket and focused on me.
I go to work,
he said, obviously taken aback by my interest. I nodded. I'm going to my parents' house to help Mom paint one of Inessa's walls mauve.
I know. You mentioned that she thinks her room was too childish.
I blinked. Sometimes I chatted about whatever crossed my mind during our brief evening conversation, or when we were in a car together, but I'd never taken into consideration that Maximus was actually listening. I gave him a sheepish smile.
You thought I didn't listen to you.
There wasn't accusation in his voice, only resignation. Because you rarely say anything in return, I said, in a feeble attempt to defend myself.
I'm not someone who talks a lot, especially not with people I don't know well.
Ouch. I nodded. If you don't tell me anything, I won't get to know you. He raised an eyebrow.
You sure you want to know about my days?
Dad never talked about work during meals, but I was sure he shared his daily work life with Mom. Maybe not in every gruesome detail, but definitely the important things. Yes. Maximus put his coffee mug down on the table.
Today I'm only dealing with standard debtors. One of them has been in hiding for weeks, but I have a lead on him.
Be careful, I said. Maximus straightened with a sardonic smile.
I'll make sure I won't die before I get you pregnant.
I flushed. Just be careful. Always. I swallowed. I'm really sorry if I offended you with my request. Maximus put a hand on my shoulder. The simple touch was more intimacy than we'd shared in a while. His warmth seeped through my clothes, and it felt surprisingly natural.
You won't ever have to apologize to me, Sarah.
The 2 days until my ovulation flew by in a blink. On the morning of my ovulation, I couldn't eat a single bite. The line on the ovulation test still hadn't reached the absolute peak color, but my period had been very light and short last time, so maybe my body didn't produce the necessary amounts of hormones for these tests. When Maximus sat down across from me and looked at my face, he asked,
Tonight.
He made it sound like we were waiting for our execution. I nodded, clutching my coffee cup in a death grip. The protein bar still lay untouched beside my hands. I'd decided to eat more protein, and since I didn't eat much, protein bars seemed like a good solution.
I'll try to be home early.
You don't have to be. It won't take long, I said quickly, then snapped my lips shut and felt heat rise into my head. Why did I have to say something like that? An apology lay on the tip of my tongue, but then I remembered Maximus's words and was unsure what to do. His face was stone. His jaw clenched. He gave a hard nod.
Sure.
He shoved to his feet, then hesitated as if he wanted to say more. But then he turned and left. I released a shaky breath. I wasn't sure how to keep myself busy until tonight. Maybe I should just have asked Maximus to do it now, but I couldn't bring myself to run after him. Since it was the weekend, I didn't even have any classes. Not that I would have been in a state of mind for them. I decided to call Isa and ask her to go shopping with me. Shopping? Isa repeated. Spring decorations. And I need a few coffee table books for the sideboard in the living room and in my bedroom. All right, if I get the chance to enter a bookstore today, I'll come along. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Isa was always good at distracting me with her dry, dark humor and I don't give a shit attitude. But today, even her presence could hardly stop my brain from dreading tonight. Maximus returned from work after dinner. He'd sent me a message that he'd grab something to eat at work. I was relieved I wouldn't have to spend an awkward dinner sitting across from him. I just wanted to get tonight over with. I was already in the bedroom when he knocked and then came in. I wore a loose-fitting nightgown and no underwear to make it easier for him. He stopped in the doorframe and regarded me with a hard-to-read expression. He wore black sweatpants, a tight white tee and white sneakers, not his usual work attire.
I hit the gym to let off some steam,
he said. I searched his face, wondering why he needed to let off steam. But my nerves stopped me from being ready to assess someone else's reasoning. When I didn't say anything, he pushed off his sneakers and kicked them out into the corridor. I almost said something, but then he closed the door and came closer. He stopped at arm's length from me and glanced down at me. For some reason, his tall frame and muscles stood out more than usual today, and it made me nervous, which didn't even make sense. It hadn't been Maximus's strength that had hurt me. He hadn't overpowered me. Maximus had never once crossed any boundaries I'd set, even though he was more than capable to do so.
We don't have to do anything,
he murmured in his deep voice. I'm ovulating tonight.
You said that already.
His voice rang with tension, but when I looked up at his face, it was carefully guarded. Can we just get started? The weight is making it worse. Maximus looked down at his feet, then gave a nod. He looked up with the same guarded expression as before and took a step toward me. Should I lie down? I asked quickly. He frowned.
If that makes you feel more comfortable.
Definitely not, but I needed to speed things up before I lost my courage and would have to wait another month for my ovulation. I climbed onto the bed and stretched out on my back. Maximus stayed where he was, his eyes on me. We don't have to do this again if everything goes to plan, I told him. He smiled strangely.
That's good news.
He sank down on the bed beside me, then after a deep exhale, he turned to me and bent over me. I realized he was going to kiss me. His hand touched my shoulder lightly. "What are you doing?" I asked, panicking. He froze with his face above mine.
I was going to kiss you and help you relax, so it's a good experience for you.
It won't be. Please don't draw it out. Can't you just do it like last time? He pushed away and turned his back on me. His shoulder muscles flexed.
Like last time.
His voice shook with anger. I don't mean it like that. I just mean, can you make it quick? He chuckled.
I might need a moment to get it up.
I'll wait. He didn't say anything for a while, didn't even move. Was he trying to get in a mental state to get an erection? Was he thinking of other girls? Now that I knew that he wasn't sleeping with other girls, I wasn't sure what I was feeling. A sort of relief that surprised me, definitely, but also a hint of guilt. He pushed to his feet and shoved down his sweatpants and boxers. My eyes widened when I saw his round ass. He sat back down, and his arm began moving. It took me a moment to realize what he was doing. I quickly looked away and up at the ceiling. I wasn't sure how much time had passed, but it seemed to take forever before Maximus finally climbed up on the bed on all fours.
Are you sure?
He asked in a low voice. I glanced at his face. It was sweaty and red, and the look in his eyes was hard as steel. My belly tightened. Yes. He slowly pushed my legs apart and climbed between them. I squeezed my eyes shut. I could feel him shift until his presence hovered above me. My nightgown was still covering me.
I can turn the lights off, if it helps,
he muttered. He sounded absolutely mad. Was he angry that I made him do it? Maybe he really didn't want kids, but my wish for them was simply too great to retreat. Yes. I opened my eyes and was greeted by near blackness. Only the outline of Maximus was above me. Can you do it now?
I can, but it'll hurt, Sarah. I don't think...
Just do it. He pushed my nightgown up. Then I felt him press up against me. He was slick with some sort of lubricant that he must have put on. I tensed up like last time.
You need to relax,
he implored. I can't. Just do it, damn it. You owe it to me. Despair and fear threatened to swallow me up.
I owe you more than that,
he said quietly. Then he shifted and pushed into me. He was slow and careful. I pressed my lips together. The pain was intense, almost as bad as last time. Images threatened to push forward. Jabba's leering face, the camera filming everything. The third man touching himself because seeing Maximus take me turned him on. A sob slipped out.
Fuck it, he snarled. I'm not doing this.
I gripped his biceps, sinking my nails into his skin. No, I'll be silent. Just make me a baby. He didn't say anything, only breathed harshly. But then he began to move harder and faster than before. I closed my eyes. It took longer than I'd hoped, so when Maximus tensed up and I felt his release, I could have cried in relief. He sagged down and buried his face in the pillow beside my head. I stayed motionless beneath him for a while, not wanting to chase him away right away, but eventually he got too heavy. Can you move? He pushed off me and got up right away. Even in the darkness, I could see him gather his clothes from the floor before he moved to the door. I almost called out for him to stay, but didn't. I wasn't sure I could bear his closeness now. Sometimes I wished we were more than just married on paper, Sometimes I wondered how it would be to fall asleep beside him and to be in his arms, to be kissed. I touched my belly and raised my hips. I'd read the latter would increase the chances of getting pregnant. Maybe it was superstition, but I needed to make sure this worked. Maximus stepped out into the corridor and began to close the door. "Thank you," I said.
Don't thank me for that.
His harsh voice made me flinch.
Let's hope we won't have to do it again.
He closed the door. I pressed my lips together and began to cry. So many emotions flooded me that it was hard to tell what caused the tears. Relief, sadness, hurt, hope. Maybe this was a new beginning for me and a little baby.
Maximus. I leaned against the door and listened to Sarah's crying. My heart hammered in my chest, and I felt sick. I couldn't remember the last time I'd thrown up. Probably as a teen as a result of too much alcohol. When I couldn't bear the sound of her devastation anymore, I went to the bathroom and took a shower. I needed to wash away the traces of what had just happened. The memories were harder to wash away. I dried myself off and put on fresh clothes. My skin felt too tight for my body, and my heart didn't stop pounding. Adrenaline pumped in my veins. I needed to get out of here or lose my fucking mind. I picked up my phone and called Primo. "I'm at a party. I need you to watch Sarah for me." The sound of girls' laughter rang in the background. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up and sat down on the couch, staring straight ahead, trying to suppress the need for destruction. I needed to let out the fire in my veins. I was about to go mad. Keys turned in the front door. I got up, grabbed my car keys, and walked past Primo without a word. I felt on the brink of something really bad. "I'll give Amo a call. Don't go out like this alone, Max." I didn't say anything. I just walked down. I arrived at the Familia gym in record time. I didn't even remember the drive there. My truck was parked askew across 2 parking spots. I stormed into the building and got on the treadmill, turning it to 12 miles per hour. I'd never been a runner. Not literally, and definitely not metaphorically. I faced my problems head on. But this problem? Fuck. What was I doing? Sweat ran down my back and face, but the running didn't help. My memories were chasing me. Sarah's soft sobs, the look in her eyes before I'd turned off the lights. I'd always loved sex. The smell, the taste, the sounds, the sensations, the orgasms. Tonight had been a nightmare. Almost as bad as last time. Maybe it would have helped if I'd found a girl for a great fuck. But I couldn't do this to Sarah. Even if she probably didn't care. She was my wife. And no matter if our vows were worth almost nothing, I wouldn't trample on them like that too. I closed my eyes and ran blindly. "Maximus!" someone shouted. My eyes flew open, and I almost lost my footing. I turned down the pace to 7 miles per hour and finally spotted Amo over on my right, watching me in concern. "I called your name twice before you reacted. Your survival skills are lacking." I didn't smile, turned back around, and kept running. Running helped a little bit, but it wasn't enough. What I really needed was blood and violence. Amo got on the treadmill beside mine and began jogging at a leisurely pace. His eyes were focused on me. "Primo called me, but he didn't know what was wrong with you." "Who says something's wrong?" Amo rolled his eyes. "One look at your face tells me all I need to know. Now spill." I slanted him a look. Amo had been through a lot with his deceased wife Cressida, and his hopeless love for Greta Falcone, but the tables had turned since he'd married Greta. I wasn't sure how much I wanted to confide in him, but not because I didn't trust Amo. I had trusted him with my life before. For some inane reason, this seemed even harder than trusting someone with my life, though. It felt intimate and weak in a way that made my skin crawl. I jammed my finger on the screen and reduced my speed further. "Sarah wants a baby," I said, then hit the stop button because the words alone made my heart race and my breath come in short bursts. The treadmill slowed to a stop, and I gripped the railings, suddenly in need of support. My heart pounded in my chest like crazy. Amo hit the stop too and turned to face me, leaning against the railing. He frowned. That's not completely unexpected, right? She's someone I always saw as a mom. The problem is that she doesn't want to use a fertility clinic. She wants to do it the old-fashioned way. Amo's confusion grew. Okay, you are wife and husband. A hint of discomfort entered Amo's expression. And if you have trouble getting it up after the shit show of the past, then nobody would blame you. Pop a pill or two. It'll get better. Sarah's an attractive woman. I narrowed my eyes at him. He held up his hands. And my cousin. Sarah's gorgeous. That's not the fucking problem. Then what is? If Sarah wants to make a baby the old-fashioned way, that's good, right? You haven't had a sex life yet, right? I gritted my teeth. No. Fuck. I stared down and took a deep breath, then told him in very basic terms what had happened tonight. Amo blew out a breath. Fuck. That's a shitty situation. Shitty didn't even begin to cover it. Just thinking about it made me want to wreak utter destruction around me. Maybe I should ask her for a divorce. That way she could start new with a guy who doesn't remind her of one of the worst days of her life. But I can't. I just can't. Even if our marriage is far from good, even if things are hard, I don't want to give her up. I chuckled bitterly. Every time I saw my ring on Sarah's finger, or heard her say my last name as hers, I felt possessive, even proud that I could call a woman like her my own. I was so fucked up. See how fucked I am? She's your wife. Of course you don't want anyone else to be with her. You're not a saint. None of us are. I'm not sure I can do this again if I didn't get her pregnant this time. I can torture whoever lies on my table, but I can't do this. You're human. I laughed. Fuck, I wish I wasn't. I wish I could be as emotionless as I am while on the job. But Sarah, talk to her. That's not my forte. Neither mine, almost said with a pressed-out laugh. But this situation is fucking you up. You need to change something. I just hope I got her pregnant tonight. Amo looked doubtful. Even if that's the case, you're married, and you'll be parents someday. Don't you think it would be good if you actually tried to be a couple, too? Let's just go kill someone. I need to vent. I need blood. I'm sure we can find someone.
Chapter 15. Sarah. The sun hadn't even risen yet, and I was hardly awake, but I got up on the morning after I hadn't gotten my period and did a pregnancy test. I paced the bathroom as I waited for the results. I could hear Maximus getting up and grabbing a shower down the hall. Our interactions since our intimate encounter had been sparse. I felt like he resented me for wanting a child. I didn't like to recall our last sexual encounter. Maybe that was why he was so angry too. I knew I needed to talk to him and salvage our marriage somehow, but I wasn't sure I had it in me to take on this battle right now. When the 10 minutes had passed, I picked up the test. Holding my breath, I risked a peek. The air left my lungs in a tight whoosh. Only one line. I couldn't believe it. I'd felt different these past few days, and I hadn't gotten my period, so why wasn't there a second line? I took 2 more tests, one digital and one like the one I'd already done. 10 minutes later, tears filled my eyes when both of them confirmed the first test's result. Not pregnant. They were supposedly 99% accurate. I called my doctor and asked to come in today. As usual, she accommodated me right away. I had an hour to get ready. I took a quick shower, then hurried into the kitchen to grab a coffee. Maximus leaned against the kitchen counter with a cup of coffee. His gaze was far away, even though he stared straight at the fridge. He wore jeans and a tight t-shirt, his usual work outfit. He snapped out of whatever memory he had been caught up in and scanned my face, his expression tightening with concern.
What's wrong?
He grabbed a long-sleeved black shirt that hung over the backrest of a kitchen chair and began to pull it over his head. His shirt rode up, revealing a sliver of his six-pack and the hint of a tattoo, a meadow and tree trunks. Oh, nothing. I just need to leave for a doctor's appointment in 15 minutes. He paused with one arm inside the shirt sleeve, worry filling his face.
You didn't tell me you needed to see a doctor. Do you need me to come with you?
No, it's nothing. He froze in his tracks.
Are you pregnant?
I don't know. That's why I'm going. I lied. Deep down, I knew the doctor would only confirm the bad news, but I couldn't admit it to Maximus. He nodded and finished putting on the shirt.
Are you sure you don't want me there?
His gaze perused the kitchen counter until he found what he was looking for. His phone. His screensaver was an image of Bacon as a puppy sitting in the snow. Only his black nose and dark eyes stood out. Messages kept popping up. You should head to work. I'll take Issa. I hadn't asked Issa to come along. I knew she would have joined me if I'd asked, but I preferred to be alone. Maximus grabbed his phone, scanned the messages, and slipped it into his jeans pocket.
Sure. Will you give me a call afterward?
Of course, I said distractedly, as I began to pack my purse and left the kitchen to grab my wool coat and put on my shoes. My 2 bodyguards waited in the waiting room as I entered the consulting room. I was glad I didn't have personal guards, but I changed men depending on who was available. If I'd had someone who knew me for a while, they might have felt obligated to inquire about my welfare. After a quick examination, it was clear that I wasn't pregnant. Seeing my face, my doctor said, "It's quite usual for it to take 6 to 12 months to get pregnant, so this is perfectly normal." "Last time I got pregnant right away," I said softly, trying to keep it together. I'd put so much hope into the one time Maximus and I had been intimate. I hadn't dared to consider that it wouldn't be enough, even if I knew better. She nodded, her face kind but professional. She was a no-nonsense, straight-to-the-point person, which was reflected in her practical short pixie cut and no makeup.
Do you get your period regularly?
I used to, but it's been less consistent in the past year.
A miscarriage and the hormonal changes shouldn't still cause you trouble, but I noticed that you've lost some weight. This might be a reason your body isn't ready to conceive, but again, this is still perfectly normal.
So if I eat more and gain some weight, it might help me get pregnant?
Being as healthy as possible, physically and mentally, is always a good start for a pregnancy.
I could do something about the physical part. The other wouldn't be so easy. Despite my doctor's encouraging words and a solution for how to improve my chances of getting pregnant, I felt crushed. I asked my bodyguards to take me to my parents' house. Only Mom was there when I arrived. One look at my face, and she led me toward the sofa and sank down beside me. Her compassionate gaze hit me like an avalanche, and I began crying. When I'd calmed down, I told Mom everything, only leaving out the details of our sexual encounter. Mom touched my cheek. "Sarah, I understand you long for a child, and I want nothing more than for you to be happy. But there's still so much trauma in your and Maximus's life. Maybe it would be good if you tried to work on that first. A child won't make everything better. Raising a child requires strength. If you and Maximus don't work on your problems, how will you work together as parents?" Her words made sense. Too much sense. I'd spent the past year trying to ignore my trauma, which had been easier as long as I'd spent as little time as possible with Maximus. But Mom was right. A child deserved parents who were more than strangers, parents who weren't haunted by their past. Once back home, I took a long shower and cuddled up on the comfy armchair in my room with Issa's newest book. She'd warned me of its gloomy nature, but I wasn't in the mood to be uplifted or cheered up. I wanted to be as miserable as possible. When I heard Maximus return home shortly after 6, I forced myself to leave my room. "You're early," I said, surprised when I spotted him kicking off his boots in the mudroom. One of them fell over, but he didn't pick it back up. It didn't bother me like it usually would. What did it matter that the shoes weren't neatly put side by side?
"You didn't message me after your appointment, so I wanted to make sure you were all right,"
he said, straightening and searching my face. His gaze lingered on my eyes. They probably still showed traces of my earlier crying. I'd removed my makeup and cleaned my face, but the puffy feeling remained. I turned to avoid eye contact and considered what I should say.
"Sarah."
Maximus stepped closer. Maybe if our marriage had been real, I would have leaned against him and sought his closeness and consolation, but as it was, I only wished for it. Why couldn't I just take the first step? Why couldn't I lean against him? It didn't work, I said with a small, shaky smile and a shrug. Maybe next time. Maximus's expression remained perfectly controlled, no sign of approval or disapproval. He took another step closer and lightly touched my shoulder. His touch was warm and gentle. I could smell the hint of curd soap on his hand and faint disinfectant. He'd never returned covered in blood since we'd been married, and often wore black clothes, so detecting blood was close to impossible. I appreciated that he made sure to clean up before he got home. Dad was the same way. He'd never brought signs of his work back home. His thumb lightly rubbed my shoulder, bringing my attention back to him. The touch was nice, and I wondered why we didn't try to have more of these small moments.
Have you eaten anything?
I realized I hadn't, not since the protein bar in the morning, despite my intention to gain some weight back. No, I forgot.
You keep forgetting,
he murmured, his voice even lower than usual. My body warmed at the sound.
Do you want me to grab something?
I quickly shook my head. I didn't want Maximus to leave. Despite what had happened, I felt safer in his presence than with my changing bodyguards. I'll prepare a quick carbonara for us. We have everything we need. Maximus lowered his arm. My skin still tingled where he'd touched me. I headed into the kitchen, followed by Maximus, and I grabbed eggs, parmesan, linguine, and pancetta. I don't have guanciale anymore, I said regretfully, as I put the piece of meat on a chopping board and took a knife from the drawer. But pancetta should do. Maximus's uncomprehending expression revealed he had no clue why it mattered.
It's both delicious.
Mom taught me to prepare carbonara with guanciale, and I prefer it that way. I got cooking, and the dish was ready to be eaten within 15 minutes. I loved the easy nature of it. Not everything needed to be complicated and fancy. Sometimes beauty was in simplicity. Sitting across from each other, Maximus and I dug in. Surprisingly, I managed to eat more now that it seemed to serve a purpose. Well, another purpose except to keep me alive.
It's absolutely delicious,
Maximus said, as he filled his plate with another serving. I quickly learned that he ate for two, which wasn't surprising considering the muscle mass he had to maintain. I nodded. Are you mad that it didn't work out right away? I wasn't sure why I returned to the topic. Maybe because the eating for two thought had brought back the reality of my current situation. Maximus put down his fork and leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his broad chest.
I'm not mad at you. I'm mad at the situation.
I pursed my lips, wondering if there really was a difference. Because it means we'll have to be intimate again.
Because I don't want a repeat performance of last time.
I flushed. It had been bad for me, but I hadn't thought Maximus hated it that much. I felt mortified, just like I had afterward in the cell when I'd seen Maximus's disgusted expression. It had reflected the feelings I harbored for myself at that moment. I ran my finger along the rim of the plate, trying to compose myself.
Maximus, I really wish Sarah wouldn't have brought it up again. I wish she were pregnant and we could move on.
Once I'm pregnant, you won't have to touch me again.
Half the time Sarah's words didn't make sense to me. I could tell she was upset, though. She couldn't even look at me. Instead, she studied the plate in front of her as if it held the answer to all of our problems. You make it sound as if I had a problem with touching you. I have a problem with how things are going, not you.
You couldn't even look at me afterward,
she whispered harshly, casting her eyes up. I half wished she hadn't because the hurt in them was a punch in the throat. It took me a moment to realize what she was referring to. And when I did, my stomach tightened to a stone. She thought I had been disgusted by her. Why the fuck should I have felt anything but burning guilt when looking at her broken form? I couldn't look at you because I felt fucking guilty. Because I felt like a fucking rapist. Fuck, because I was one. She froze, her finger still resting on the plate.
You didn't want to do it.
What kind of difference does it make? I roared. pushing to my feet because I felt ready to combust. I had left work early and handed the debtor off to my father for further handling. Now I wished I had just kept kicking his sorry ass. My actions speak for themselves, don't they?
It makes a world of difference, Maximus,
Sarah said, slapping the tabletop, suddenly angry for some reason.
We were both victims.
I gripped the backrest of the chair. I wanted nothing more than to throw it across the room. I don't think we're talking about the same event. I had to force myself on you.
You had to. And I gave you the okay because I knew you didn't have a choice. Just like I didn't.
I stared at her, at a loss. She seemed to believe everything she had said. How could her version of the events be so different from mine? But you've acted like you don't want me close since we got married.
Because you reminded me of what happened, and of my helplessness. You could do something to work through the trauma. You hunted those men and killed them. You acted. I felt like I did nothing, or at best, reacted.
Did she really think I'd gotten past the trauma of that day? You survived a horrible thing. That's not nothing, Sarah. And you had a lot to process, even afterward. The pregnancy. I still didn't like talking about her losing our baby, because that too felt like it was my fault. I hadn't wanted the child, hadn't wanted a reminder, and our unborn child had died, almost as if my thoughts had been strong enough to kill it. I'd avoided the oak tree for that very reason, to avoid being faced with memories. Like a coward. I hated being one, so I had begun the process of having the tree tattooed into my back. That way, I'd never be able to escape again.
Sometimes I think that it's my fault our baby died.
She swallowed thickly.
That because I was so caught up in my trauma, I couldn't show that I still wanted it. That I didn't love it enough because of what happened, and that it just left because of that.
I shook my head, feeling completely at a loss. I leaned more heavily on the backrest. I couldn't believe that she'd harbored the same feelings of guilt as I had. Hearing those thoughts aloud from her lips made far less sense than in my head. Nobody would have blamed you if you'd not chosen to keep this pregnancy. She gave me a look that made it clear that wasn't true, and she was probably right. But you did choose to keep the pregnancy. So even if you were struggling with what happened, the baby knew you wanted it. And pregnancy losses are common. It's rarely anyone's fault, Sarah. You heard what the doctor said.
I know. But it can be hard to see facts if it's your baby. If I ever get pregnant again, I'll do everything right.
I bridged the distance between us and touched her shoulder. Fuck. I wanted to pull her into my arms. She peered up at me with those soulful, always melancholic eyes. You did nothing wrong last time either. Maybe you should consider talking to someone professional about your feelings. I was the last person who'd ever go to a psychiatrist to work through the traumatic shit I'd witnessed and done in my life. But maybe they could help Sarah. I didn't want her to carry this kind of guilt.
I don't want to talk about it. I just want to move on,
she said. She looked at me as if I could make it happen, as if I held the key to her happiness in my hand. I'll do what I can to make that happen. She briefly touched my hand still resting on her shoulder. Her smooth, small hand on mine made my heart speed up.
You know what I want more than anything else?
I fucking dreaded our next sexual encounter. But I wasn't a coward who ducked away when shit hit the fan. I'd make Sarah a baby, even if it cost me the last shreds of my sanity. I'd make my wife happy, and if a baby was the only way to do it, then she'd get her baby. 2 weeks later, Sarah and I shared another sexual encounter that was hardly any better. She still wanted to get it over with as fast as possible, only concerned about the technicalities, me getting my sperm into her. Even with a ton of lubricant, which I'd insisted we use even though Sarah was sure it would lower the chances of pregnancy, the ordeal was painful for her. I was so fucking done with it. If she didn't get pregnant this time, I wasn't sure what I would do. Maybe we simply needed to use medical help, even though Sarah wanted things to happen naturally for some superstitious reason. As if anything about our sex life felt natural. Sarah didn't get pregnant yet again. We didn't talk about what that meant. I was half tempted to insist on a visit to the fertility center. I didn't want a repeat performance. I didn't want to keep feeling like I did that first horrible time. I was fucking done. But I also wanted to salvage our marriage. I wanted us to become more than what we were. With how things were progressing, that would never happen. Chapter 16. Maximus. We can't go on like this, I told Sarah the morning after a pregnancy test when I entered the kitchen. I knew she would simply continue living a separate life until her next fertile window rolled around, and then have me mount her like a breeding bull. But I was done with this shit. I'd never had a problem with detached sex. I'd never sought an emotional bond with a woman. Sex had been enough. But sex had been fucking great back then. Sarah wasn't a fling. She was my wife, and I wanted more than the miserable marriage we currently led. More than the awkward and painful sex. And I knew I would have to be the one to take the reins to make that happen. For Sarah, sex had no good connotation. It was my job to change that, even if I was also the reason it was bad in the first place. Sarah looked up from her spot at the kitchen table, where she clung to her coffee mug. What do you mean? I motioned my pointer finger between us. I mean this. We're married. I know we had a horrible start, but I don't want things to keep being horrible. I want a real marriage. I want you to feel like my wife, not a stranger. I could see the questions in her eyes. I sat across from her. And I'm not talking about sex, okay? I'm talking about us never spending time together. For Sarah to ever be comfortable having sex with me, she needed to be comfortable in my presence. We needed to become more than strangers. We could watch a movie together when you come home tonight from work, Sarah suggested softly. I was glad she was open to the idea. What kind of movies do you like to watch? I asked. I dreaded a romantic movie marathon. I doubted we were ready to see happy couples on screen. I love historical movies. I chuckled because I should have seen it coming. She was majoring in art history, and most of the books in her room were historic tomes. Okay, I said slowly. What do you like? Action movies, science fiction, fantasy. She looked thoughtful, then she shrugged. Many historical movies have lots of action, and many series have a historical setting that is fantasy. Maybe we could start with Saving Private Ryan. I watched it a long time ago and loved it. I'd love to see it again. Why not? I've never watched it. I come home with a bucket of chicken wings, and Sarah had prepared mac and cheese to go with it. We settled on the sofa in front of the TV. Even though we were almost an arm's length away, I counted it as a win. Still, I wanted nothing more than to reach over and pull Sarah against me. She looked particularly beautiful tonight in a short, very soft white sweater and a purple corduroy skirt. She pulled her tight-clad legs under herself and gave me a small smile. I was glad we'd opted for a movie and not a dinner that would burden us with conversation. I wanted our first dates to go smoothly and not end in utter awkwardness. I switched on the movie. Halfway through it, I raised my eyebrows at Sarah. This wasn't what I expected from you. She tilted her head. Because of its brutality? I nodded. I didn't have trouble with ripped-off limbs, but I would have thought that Sarah was too squeamish for it. History has many gruesome moments. You can't study any kind of history without paying attention to the most barbaric moments in time. Do you hate it? No. It's actually quite entertaining. For a historic movie, Sarah said with raised eyebrows. I shrugged with a chuckle. No, it's really good, but I won't turn into a history buff, sorry. I'm not that kind of guy. I know. I frowned, wondering if our differences bothered Sarah. Was Paolo interested in history? I wasn't sure why I even brought him up. He'd never been a topic in our marriage. From what I heard, he had already married a young woman from Baltimore. Sarah angled her body to me and put her arm up on the backrest.
Paolo?
She shook her head with a look of honest confusion.
I don't know. I never spent time with him. And I don't expect you to like the same things I do. Or do you expect me to enjoy guns and knives and...
She trailed off, probably referring to violence or something of the sort. Maybe this was the best proof of how little we know about each other. That's part of my job. It's not all there is to me. She flushed.
So you don't like it?
No. Most of the time I do. But it's not what's really important to me.
Then what is?
My family, our dogs, the woods. I love the outdoors and the sense of freedom it gives me. Nature's rules are simple. Humans are complicated. Sarah let out a small laugh.
That's true.
You used to love pottery, but you haven't done it since we got married. Embarrassment filled her face.
I haven't used your gift yet either. I know.
I didn't say it to make you feel guilty. I just want to know why. She looked down at her fingers, which were playing with the loose thread on her white wool tights.
I love the moments of pensiveness I had when I did pottery. I don't enjoy being in my head as much anymore.
I grimaced, realizing why. You could do pottery in a more distracting setting. That way you wouldn't have to be in your head.
But where could I do pottery here?
She asked, motioning around us. I could make some room in my fitness room. She bit her lip with a sheepish smile.
Have you ever seen how big a potter's wheel is? And I need an oven to fire my pottery.
To be honest, before you, I thought pottery was something nuns or grandmas did. Sarah's eyes lit up with indignation.
That's so not true. The pottery art scene is so lively and creative. It's not boring or old-fashioned as you make it sound.
You'll have to show me. I'll get a potter's wheel into the room, and you'll use it.
Okay. I sold the wheel I used before, so we'll have to order a new one, which will take a few weeks. I never had a kiln. You need a good place for it because of the heat.
We could set up an oven in my parents' barn.
If we can remove any fire hazards, that would be a great idea.
Seeing her honest smile and the way it lit up her eyes, I wanted nothing more than to kiss her. When I came home the next day, the kitchen smelled of homemade chili, but Sarah wasn't there. Taking my gun out, I went in search of her and found her in our rooftop garden, cuddled up in several blankets on the swing seat in front of the gas hearth. "May I?" I asked. She jumped, then let out a small laugh as she peered up at me.
You startled me.
I'm late. I'm sorry. Did you have dinner yet?
No. I waited for you.
I'll grab 2 bowls for us, I said. Steam rose from the hot chili as I stepped back out into the cold and headed over to Sarah. She took a bowl from me and put it down on her lap. I sank down beside her and did the same. It was a wonderful chili, cooked as close to perfection as possible. Have you ever cooked chili over the open flame? The smokiness is incredible. Sarah shook her head.
It sounds delicious.
She nodded toward the gas flame in the hearth.
I suppose it won't work with gas.
No, I said immediately. I didn't like the gas flame. Sure, it was less work and less cleaning, but nothing beat a real fire. I wish we could make a fire here, then I'd show you.
Can you cook?
She asked, surprised. I chuckled. No, not at all. I'd make the fire, and you can make the chili. Or we'd have to visit my parents and have chili there. Mom makes a fantastic chili over the open flame.
That sounds like a good idea.
Sarah positively glowed. She was incredibly gorgeous. She bit her lip as if she could see what I was thinking. I wanted to kiss her so badly that it was physically painful not to.
Maximus,
Sarah began, then fell silent. She set her bowl down, then scooted a bit closer. I put my bowl on the ground. Sarah squinted into the flames in utmost concentration. She turned around, looking like someone about to take their first bungee jump. She leaned forward and pressed a brief kiss to my lips, then retreated quickly. I was stunned. "What was that?" I murmured. She squeezed her eyes shut for a moment, then regarded me with an expression as if she wasn't sure either.
I just wanted to test something.
Test something, I repeated. If my lips hadn't still been tingling, I would have convinced myself the kiss hadn't happened. I raised my eyebrows, and Sarah stopped, smiling in embarrassment. Never for that, I rumbled. She nodded, then yawned. I rose to my feet and held out my hand. You're tired. I kept you up too late. She took my hand and let me pull her to her feet. You can test something whenever you want, you know? She nodded again, but I could tell she was stunned by her own courage. Maybe I would have to be the one to act, but given our past, that wasn't as easy as I wanted. We walked back inside, and Sarah headed toward her bedroom. Before she closed the door, she said,
Good night, Maximus.
Good night. She closed the door, and I headed to my bedroom. Fuck. Tonight I really wished we weren't sleeping in separate rooms. My phone lit up with an email that the potter's wheel I'd ordered would arrive tomorrow. Finally. Who would have thought it was such a hot commodity?
My ovulation is in 3 or 4 days,
Sarah said when I sat down at the breakfast table across from her with a cup of coffee. I would have never thought a sentence could cause me so much dread. So this was why she had been so nervous last night. We'd spent almost every evening having dinner together in front of the TV in the past week. It was a tentative start, even if the distance between us still seemed impossible to overcome. Sarah's moment of bravery hadn't changed much between us. We hadn't kissed again. I knew I needed to stop waiting for Sarah to act. She cleared her throat but didn't look up from her fruit bowl. It was loaded with almond butter and chia seeds. She had been eating more since her doctor had recommended it, and it was slowly becoming apparent. Her curves had become more prominent again, even if I rarely allowed myself to admire them.
We should try every night for the next few days.
3 or 4 times of painful sex? For Sarah on a physical level, and me on a mental one? Fuck. I wasn't a pussy, but the thought of having her lying under me in the dark again, stiff as a board, while I tried to get off as soon as possible was a nightmare. One I had absolutely no intention of reliving. We'd made progress in the past 2 weeks, but that would ruin it all. Under one condition, I said. She looked up, frowning. So far I'd always done what she asked me to do. My guilty conscience wouldn't allow me to act any other way, but I simply couldn't do this again. It felt like I was forcing myself on her every time, even though she asked for it.
Okay,
she said slowly. Tonight we're spending a chilled evening in our rooftop garden, chatting and just trying to be a normal couple and kiss. And tomorrow we're having sex, but we're not using lubricant. I'm not going to stick my cock in without preparation. We're going to do this the right way, like it should be done. Concern filled her eyes, but she nodded.
But we might still need lubricant.
Maybe we would. Fuck. I'd always been confident in my ability to get a woman wet, but the situation with Sarah was different, and it had changed me. But I'd do my best to get Sarah relaxed and wet, even if I was the last person she wanted to be with.
What would you like me to cook tonight?
Sarah asked after a moment, sounding more composed than a minute ago. Screw it. We would be spending the next few days trying to make a baby. I couldn't walk on eggshells anymore. I'd prefer to eat you, but as that's not on the menu tonight, I'd love a hearty soup. Sarah gave me an open-mouthed look, then snapped her lips shut.
All right.
Fuck. I would have laughed at her stunned expression if I wasn't nervous like a virgin about the next few days. Sarah was outside, cuddled up under even more blankets in front of the gas hearth. In my hands I held bowls with the beans and pasta soup Sarah had prepared. We ate in silence, allowing the soup to warm us from the inside. When we were done, I put our bowls on the ground since Sarah seemed ready to cling to hers all evening. We've done this before, sitting beside each other like this, And you even kissed me, I reminded her.
I know, but that was just a peck. And it's just kind of strange knowing what's going to happen all day. It's increasing my anxiety.
I raised my eyebrows. She planned our sex life according to her ovulation. Sarah grimaced and let out an embarrassed laugh.
Hypocritical of me, right?
You're my wife, and I won't ever badmouth you. But since you were the one who called you hypocritical...
I deserve that. I know.
You deserve so much more than what we have right now, Sarah. She looked at me with huge emotional eyes. I was done with words. I touched her cheek and leaned forward. Just a kiss, okay?
Okay,
she breathed.
Sarah. Maximus's face came closer, and his other hand came up to touch my cheek. But before his lips touched mine, he paused, giving me time to pull back or stop him. I didn't. Maximus regarded me, his eyes seemingly taking in every inch of my face, and bridged the last inch between us until his lips brushed mine. The friction sent sparks through my entire body. My cheeks became warm, and soon my entire body felt hot. Maximus kept the kiss light, sliding his lips over mine once more before he pulled back, but only a couple of inches. I wished he wouldn't stop. I wished he would keep kissing me.
Was that okay for you?
Yes, I got out. A kiss was nothing compared to what we had already done and would be doing in the next few days, but it felt intimate on a level that Maximus and I hadn't reached before, and I had enjoyed it. The trauma from the past was surprisingly quiet, maybe because we'd never kissed during the incident. Maximus slowly lowered his hands from my cheek, and I mourned the loss of his warmth and closeness. He wrapped an arm around me, and I leaned against him, peering up at his face. He met my gaze and gave me a small smile before he returned his attention to the flames. His eyes glowed as the fire reflected in them. I allowed myself to see Maximus at that moment, see him as he was, and not as a part of a memory that he and I needed to overcome to move into a future together. And as my eyes took him in, like they had taken him in when he'd picked me up that day, I realized I was still attracted to him. He looked nothing like the guys I'd admired in the past, but my body still warmed when I saw his strong body and stunning eyes. If I could focus on that, on the man before me in the next few days and hopefully beyond that too, then maybe we could build a connection that wasn't constantly tainted by the past. I think I'm attracted to you, I said. In the past, I would have never uttered something rash like this. Maybe it was Issa's influence on me. Maximus's eyebrows climbed his forehead as he gave me an amused look.
You think?
I laughed. It's complicated.
I know,
he murmured.
You know what's not complicated?
His gaze burned into me in a way it had never done before. No, I whispered.
There's nothing complicated about how I feel about you, Sarah. I'm definitely, 100%, no doubt about it, attracted to you.
Oh.
Yeah.
I let out an embarrassed laugh, but felt secretly pleased by his admittance. It had never crossed my mind that Maximus found me attractive. Living in the moment seemed to work for us. I wanted to preserve the easiness of tonight.
Chapter 17. Maximus. When I returned for dinner the next day, Sarah was stirring a pot with ragu. She stiffened when I came in, and her expression burst with anxiety. I'd hoped last night in the evenings of us sitting on the sofa, watching a series or movie would make tonight easier, but scheduled intimacy always messed with the mind. If we both suffered through dinner in this atmosphere, we would never be relaxed for what came after. "Are you hungry?" I asked, not sitting down. Sarah peered down at her sauce.
Not really, but I won't let you eat alone.
I walked over to her, took the spoon out of her hand, and put it down on the cutting board, then turned off the stove. "We can eat later." She swallowed, understanding what I meant. Lead the way, I said, wanting her to go on her own terms. She nodded and began walking, her hands slack in mine. I wished I knew what was going on inside her head. On the other hand, it was probably better for my chances of getting it up that I didn't. My heart was pounding in my chest as if this were my first time. Fuck. I'd been more confident before that, even as a 14-year-old boy. We stepped into her bedroom, and I closed the door, then released Sarah.
I'll take a shower,
she said. I grabbed her arm. Don't.
But...
Her gaze lingered, almost longing on the bathroom door. She was nervous. Fuck, so was I. Too much was at stake. You had yoga in the afternoon. I know you shower afterward. I doubt you've rolled around in dirt since then. It'll be fine, I said firmly. In her new quest to become as healthy as possible, she'd started doing yoga once or twice a week with Isa. I didn't want the taste of soap in my mouth. This would be hard enough. I didn't need any additional factors that would make this a sterile experience. She released a small breath, and a flicker of determination filled her eyes. She had a goal in mind, becoming a mother. She wanted to get this over with, and I wanted to salvage this marriage somehow, even if it was doomed from the start. She began to unbutton the neckline of her dress, revealing a white lace bra. I would have preferred to undress her slowly, but I let her do what she obviously needed to do to feel at ease. She quickly slipped her dress over her head until she stood in front of me in her underwear. Sarah was a gorgeous woman, and since she'd started eating more in her mission to become pregnant, she'd regained the curves she'd had before her life got ruined. I wasn't sure how she could have ever doubted her attractiveness, but I'd seen how surprised she'd been by my admittance yesterday. Remembering her words, I tugged my shirt over my head, then moved toward her. She tensed, but didn't move away.
Can we turn off the lights?
She asked. The note of pleading in her tone broke through my determination. Sure. I flipped the switch and bathed us in darkness. Only the hallway light coming through the crack of the door filtered in. I could just make out her outline as she headed for the bed and lay down. The rustling of the sheets was the only sound in the room. I wondered if Sarah even held her breath. I sank down beside her. You have to tell me if you don't want something, and also if you enjoy my touch.
Okay.
Then silence. I took a deep breath. I had a plan, and it had to work. I lay down beside her, propped up on my side. I liked passionate sex, but Sarah and I both needed to take it slow tonight. I touched her shoulder.
Maximus?
I paused, my fingers resting on the silky skin of her upper arm.
I'm scared.
I told you I want to make this good for you. I know I hurt you the last times, but today I'll do everything I can to make sure it won't hurt. And if it does, that it'll be good soon after.
I'm not scared of the pain. I never really was,
she whispered.
I'm scared because I don't know what to expect. What if I can't feel good because of what happened? What if the memories hold me back?
I leaned over her. Did you enjoy our kiss yesterday?
Yes.
Then trust your body to enjoy this too. My heart hammered in my chest. Fuck. I was nervous, but I'd be damned if I admitted that to Sarah. She had enough baggage to carry. She didn't need to carry mine too. I wish I could take the memories from you, but I can't. I can only replace them with better memories. I swallowed. I'm good at this. Don't think, just allow yourself to fall. I knew I was asking a lot. She nodded, but her expression remained veiled by the dim light. I'm going to kiss you, I warned. Our lips brushed slightly like last night, and the same sparks I'd felt back then surged through my body. That such a simple kiss, under these circumstances no less, gave me these kinds of sensations and hope for our future. I kissed the corner of her mouth and her chin, then moved back up to the corner of her mouth. Drawing in her scent, I brushed my lips over hers before I nibbled at her lower lip, testing the waters. Her eyes fluttered closed as she parted her lips. I trailed my tongue over her lip before I deepened our kiss. For the first time, I could really taste my wife. And fuck, she was perfect. I savored our kiss, every stroke of her tongue, every exhale against my lips. I should have kissed her like this sooner. Slowly, I moved down her throat and over her collarbone, my lips tracing her skin. This slow approach was new to me, too. But the feel of Sarah's silky skin and her sweet rose scent made it worthwhile. I kissed the swell of her breast, then her nipple through the fabric before I moved on to her other breast and repeated the same motions. Her quickened breathing filled the silence. Her nipples puckered under my ministrations. I tugged down her bra and allowed my lips to discover her nipple, even if I couldn't see much. I closed my lips around it and sucked gently. Sarah drew in her breath, but as my eyes grew used to the darkness, I could see that her fingers were still pressed flat against the linen. I wanted fingernails raking over my back and hands ripping at the sheets. I pulled back and brushed my thumb over her hardened nipple, loving how much firmer it felt. Then I blew against it. She twitched, her hand gripping my bicep as if she needed something solid to hold on to. But she was still tense. I left kisses on every inch of her skin as I moved lower. Her breathing hitched when I kissed the skin below her belly, then her hip bone. I avoided her panties for now, and kissed a trail down her thigh to her calf, only to work my way back up to her knee. Her perfect skin felt smooth and warm under my fingertips and lips. I touched her thigh and pushed her legs apart. My lips grazed the inside of her thigh, slowly moving up. I lightly brushed my fingertips over her panties. The fabric wasn't wet yet, which only made me more determined to give her pleasure. At the end of the night, I wanted Sarah to be sweaty and exhausted from several orgasms. I kissed along the edge of her panties. At first, she'd hardly dared to breathe, but now her panting served as the jungle drum that spurred me on. I could smell her pussy, a subtle muskiness that spoke to a primal part of me. I kissed her pubic bone through the lace, then her pussy, loving how her pussy lips yielded under the pressure. Focusing only on her scent and the feel of her, I kept kissing her pussy through her panties until I couldn't take it anymore. I slid my tongue over her slit, wedging her panties between her lips. Her breathing hitched, and her fingers tightened on my biceps. Those were the only markers I had as guidance. Apart from that, she was quiet and motionless, but I hadn't expected anything else. I had to let my instinct guide me in this and what my nose was picking up, that the musky scent had increased. Lifting my head, I hooked my fingers in her panties and slid them down her body. Then I returned my lips to her silky pussy lips and resumed kissing them. The tip of my tongue parted them, and I felt the smooth skin hiding within and tasted her subtle saltiness. I gently stroked along her slit, loving the feel of her pussy lips around my tongue. Sarah's breathing deepened further, then halted in her chest when I brushed my tip over her clit. I circled it for a bit to see how she liked it, and from the sounds of her panting, I would say a lot. Then I brushed it with the flat of my tongue. I pushed her legs a bit further apart and began to lick over her clit. After a while of her pants and her aroma growing stronger, I dove deeper, my tongue seeking her entrance. It was soaked, her lust immediately coating my tongue. She tasted so sweet. I had done this. My heart seemed to skip a beat, only to gallop even faster next. I exhaled against her, and my cock sprang to life, blood finally filling it rapidly. Sarah's lust turned me on, and it was all I needed to get it up. I'd been too tense before, and hadn't allowed myself to enjoy any part of this before I knew Sarah did too. My cock had hardened painfully, without any mental tricks. It didn't matter that she still wanted the lights out. This wasn't about me. This was about her. One day she'd be able to look into my eyes when we had sex and not see our past.
Sarah. I was overwhelmed by the sensations. I was still nervous, but Maximus's touch created so many unexpected feelings inside me that I hardly had the time or the capacity to focus on my nerves. I glanced down carefully, not wanting Maximus to know I was watching him. It was dark, but not dark enough that a man like him wouldn't realize he was being watched. His head hovered between my legs, bobbing back and forth lightly as his tongue stroked my sensitive flesh. His tip traced my inner lips and my opening, parting me gently with every caress. I felt hot and soppy, needy and desperate for more. I felt like the Sarah I never got the chance to be. Maximus cupped my clit and sucked lightly. The muscles in my legs tightened, my core clenched, and a flood of wetness pooled out. Maximus rumbled like a bear and dove down to lick up my arousal. I grabbed the top of his head in shock. This felt so dirty and animalistic, something I never thought sexy. Bodily fluids had never seemed appealing, but the way Maximus ate me up made me reconsider my assessment. Maximus pulled me harder against his mouth. I could feel his last reservations crumbling, could feel him becoming less careful, and it felt so good. My lips formed an "oh" when he pushed his tongue into me and began to stroke my inner walls. My hips shifted as the sensations grew. Maximus's thumb rubbed wetness over my clit while his tongue kept thrusting into me. My muscles quivered, and the heat in my core became close to unbearable. A choked cry tumbled from my lips, my legs clamping around Maximus's head as a wave of pure pleasure exploded from my pussy all through my body, lighting up my nerves like a firework. I clung to Maximus's arm as I basked in the sensations. It was over far too soon, but at the same time, it felt as if I couldn't take much more of it. My chest heaved as I tried to wrap my mind around what had just happened. Maximus sat up. Even in the near dark, I could see him watching me with hungry, possessive eyes. If my head hadn't already felt hot, I would have flushed now. He stretched out beside me, his breathing faster and deeper than before. We lay like that for a while. Then he turned around to me. I thought he'd sleep with me now. But then I felt his hand on my thigh, lightly stroking the sensitive skin there, before he moved up between my legs and slowly pushed a finger into me. My teeth buried into my lower lip as I savored the sensation.
Is this good for you?
I was far better than good. It felt as if the friction lit up my entire body. I nodded quickly, not sure I could form words. He slid his finger back out, then slipped it back in, over and over, soon moving faster and harder. My body yearned for more. As if he could sense my need, he added a second finger. The penetration felt entirely different from during our previous sexual encounters. My body was eager for every thrust, seeking the friction and the delicious sensations it brought. Soon I was panting uncontrollably again. I knew Maximus was watching me. I could feel his hot breath on my shoulder. His touch didn't leave room for self-doubt. The sensations were too strong, too overpowering, and when they accumulated and crashed down on me like a wave, I let out a loud moan I'd never considered myself capable of. Maximus exhaled as he slowed his thrusts until he stilled completely inside me. He pulled his fingers out of me and rested his hand on my belly. My body felt heavy, and the place between my legs was hot and wet.
Are you ready for sex?
Maximus asked. I doubted I could ever feel more ready than I did now, physically at least. I was still scared of my mind. Would it torture me with memories I didn't want? Or would it allow me to just enjoy the present? Yes. Maximus stretched out beside me.
Maybe it would be good to have you ride me.
The chances of conception are higher in a lying position. It wasn't the only reason I preferred the missionary position. Sitting on top of Maximus felt too exposing, and I wasn't experienced enough to feel that daring. His silence told me it wasn't the answer he'd wanted, but making a baby was what this was about, even if the unexpected bonus of pleasure had been added to the equation.
And we definitely don't want to have to do it again, right?
His sarcasm hit me unprepared. I swallowed. I wasn't sure where his anger came from. Was he furious because we had to have sex? Was he angry because I wanted him to make me a baby?
I shouldn't have said that,
he muttered, but I could tell that he had spoken his true feelings.
We do whatever you want, Sarah. If you want me on top, then that's what we'll do.
Thank you, I said, suddenly not quite as aroused as before. After he sat up, he moved between my legs and stretched out on top of me, but he kept most of his weight off. He pressed a kiss against my lips, catching me off guard again, but this time in a far more pleasant way. I'd always imagined kissing as something wonderful and connecting, and was sad I never got to experience it in that way.
We need to turn your head off again,
he murmured, moving his hand between our bodies. His fingers found my clit and rubbed it, spreading my own arousal on it. Soon I was panting again, my body preparing for another release, but then Maximus pulled his hand away and pressed his tip against my opening. I drew in a deep breath through my nose, preparing for what came next. This part had always been very uncomfortable, and I didn't want to get my hopes up that it would be better this time. Even in the dark, I could tell Maximus regarded my face with soul-searching intensity as he shifted his hips. My walls yielded to the pressure, and his tip slipped in. Oh. I exhaled at the fullness that had a very different quality to it than before. As he slid deeper, I could feel every inch of him stroking my sensitive walls. My lashes fluttered, delicious lust filling my core. I still felt stretched and the hint of soreness, but pleasure overshadowed everything. Nothing of what had happened so far reminded me of the past. Maximus stilled when he was all the way inside me, his expression tight and controlled.
Are you all right?
His deep rumble made my core clench. He hissed and tensed on top of me. I felt him shift, and the lights came on dimly.
Sarah.
It feels good, I admitted, blinking against the soft glow of the lamp on my nightstand. I need you to move. Realization flooded his face. Then he smiled.
Your wish is my command.
He pulled back a few inches, then pushed back in with more force than before. I pressed my hands against the mattress, not sure what to do with them. I felt restless.
Grab my ass. That way you can show me if you want more.
After a moment of hesitation, I put my palms on Maximus's firm ass. It flexed with every thrust. It gave another dimension to what was happening and turned me on even more. Soon I clung to his ass cheeks and urged him to move deeper and faster. I could barely breathe, much less think straight. My body was flooded with so much pleasure that I could feel it from my clenched toes up to my puckered nipples. Maximus's lips found mine in a messy kiss.
Come for me.
You too, I breathed out.
Your orgasm will milk my cock, honey. Don't worry.
His words sent me over the edge. My core clenched as pleasure radiated through my body. My nails sank into Maximus's ass, my eyes closing in surrender of the powerful lust. Maximus let out a groan, his ass cheeks clenching under my palms, followed by his cock growing even harder inside me. And then I could feel his release deep inside me, filling me up. My lips parted as I panted, exhausted and mesmerized by the sight of Maximus's lust-filled expression. During our previous encounters, his expression had been taut with concentration. Seeing him unrestrained like this, and knowing he could be like this with me, loosened a knot in my chest. He pushed up on his arms as if he wanted to get up. I squeezed his ass. Don't. He frowned down at me. Our chances are higher if you stay in me for a few more minutes. My cheeks heated, not just because of the words I'd said, but also because it wasn't the only reason I didn't want him to pull out yet. My body clung to him, and I simply didn't want to lose the feeling of our intimate connection. I wanted to enjoy it a little longer. Who knew if I'd ever feel it again? He lowered himself back on his elbows without a word. The tenseness had returned to his face. No sign of the previous relaxedness anymore.
Of course. We have to make sure this works.
I peered up at his face, trying to determine the emotion behind the words. but Maximus had closed me off again. Our intimate moment turned awkward soon, and I began to wiggle. "I think we're fine now." Maximus shoved up and got out of bed.
"I'll grab a shower. You probably can't join me."
He looked at me over his shoulder, already on his way to the bathroom. I shook my head. I lifted my hips off the mattress because I'd read somewhere that would help. Maximus regarded me for a couple more heartbeats before he left without another word. I closed my eyes and touched my lower belly. I could still feel the aftershocks of my orgasm and the hot sensation of Maximus's release inside me. With a glance at the closed bathroom door, I slid my hand lower to feel my pussy. It felt swollen, in a way I had never thought possible, and my light touch ignited a new desire that surprised me. With a small smile, I closed my eyes and relished in the sensations. Eventually, I lowered my hips back to the mattress. The bathroom door opened, and Maximus stepped out, a towel wrapped around his narrow hips. I allowed myself to take in his muscled chest and the tattoos adorning his skin before I realized what I was doing and met his gaze. His expression was wary, and the contentment I'd felt evaporated. In the light from the bathroom, I suddenly felt vulnerable and exposed. I grabbed the sheets and sat up, covering my body.
"I'm heading to bed now,"
Maximus said, then paused. I licked my lip, wondering if I should ask him to stay. I realized I would have liked that. His proximity that had been strange to me before now felt almost familiar. Our movie evenings and now our first enjoyable sex made me want to be even closer to him.
"I'll leave on the light in case you want to use the bathroom. Sleep tight,"
he said as he headed toward the bedroom door. I realized I'd missed the right moment to ask for him to stay. With a heavy heart, I watched him leave and closed the door. Chapter 18. Sarah. When I woke the following morning, I stared at the ceiling for a while, simply enjoying the moment. Today was Saturday, and Maximus had plans to help his parents in the shelter again. I decided to ask him if I could join him. I wanted to make more of an effort, not just with Maximus, but also with his parents. I had rarely seen them since our wedding, and I felt guilty for it. They probably thought I didn't like them, which wasn't true. They had been kind to me, and I wanted to get to know them better. I glanced at the clock on my wall. It was only 7 o'clock, but in the past, Maximus had always left around 9 to visit them and drop me off at my parents' on the way there. I got out of bed. Despite my nerves, I went in search of Maximus. Today was still the highest chance of conception. At the thought of repeating last night, my body warmed, and my core clenched. I was looking forward to Maximus's touch. For the first time, the reason I wanted Maximus's closeness wasn't centered around having a baby. My body was lusting for his touch, for his lips and tongue. Strangely enough, last night it felt like a liberation. It had cut through one of the shackles of the past that had bound me. I never thought enjoying Maximus's touch would help me with the past, but it did. I hadn't even been haunted by nightmares. The 2 previous times of us having sex to get me pregnant had triggered me into some of my worst nightmares as of yet. But last night, there was absolutely nothing. I hadn't dreamed at all. A sense of accomplishment filled me. It felt like a small victory against the past and what my head made me want to believe about myself since the incident. I knew there would still be bad nights and days. The past couldn't just easily be shaken off, but I felt new hope that I could give my future a new, positive twist. I went to Maximus's bedroom. The door was open a gap. I knocked and stepped in, then froze when I spotted Maximus. He only had a towel wrapped around his hips and was naked otherwise. He was toweling his wet hair. I allowed myself to admire his body. He worked out almost every day, and it showed in every inch of his body, from his bulging biceps over his broad chest to his six-pack and round ass. Even his tattoos hardly bothered me. They were artfully done, especially the forest scene on his right pec and shoulder, intricate firs and broad-leafed trees, a small meadow and a creek. It reminded me of the forest at his parents' house. Maximus raised his eyebrows in surprise.
I hit the treadmill early, so I had to shower again. What's up?
My face turned hot. His eyes took in my blush, then briefly slid over my body. I still wore my silk nightgown, which probably didn't hide my hardened nipples. My body felt foreign in its newfound lustfulness. I'm still fertile, so... I trailed off when Maximus's expression hardened. Talking about fertility always pushed his buttons. I wasn't sure why it triggered him so much. After all, I'd made it clear from the start that I wanted sex to become pregnant, even if I had enjoyed last night tremendously.
Now?
He asked, tossing the towel he'd used to dry his hair away. I followed its descent to the floor. Maximus was such a slob. I nodded. If that's okay for you?
I told you. I'll do whatever you need me to do.
He lowered his arms to his sides and waited for me to say something. I wanted him to enjoy it, too. I didn't want him to do it only for me. That was a new development I hadn't expected. Then I want us to do it now, I said firmly. Maximus glanced toward the window. The sheer curtains protected us from the outside, but they let in the sunlight.
I can close the drapes if you want darkness.
I quickly shook my head. No, it's fine this way. Even if having Maximus's eyes on me was new and embarrassed me, it also added to the excitement.
In my bed.
Maximus motioned at his bed. It was unmade, not that it mattered. For what we had in mind, it didn't need to be made. I smiled, feeling unsure how to proceed. Did Maximus want me to act? He took the decision from me and came toward me. He lightly touched my waist as he lowered his lips to mine. I immediately stepped up on my tiptoes to make it easier for him. His tongue sought entrance, and I closed my eyes. Soon he deepened the kiss, while his hands massaged my waist. I wanted them higher and lower. I wanted them everywhere. As if he could read my mind, or maybe my body, one of his hands moved down and under my nightgown. My panties were soaked, and when he slid his fingers under them to stroke my heated flesh, a new wave of wetness pooled out of me.
Sarah.
His low rumble of my name when he felt how aroused I was only made me more desperate for more. Maximus took my hand and led me toward his bed. I sat on the edge, waiting for him to join me, but instead he knelt on the floor and pushed up my nightgown.
Lie back and lift your hips.
I did both, and when he pulled my panties down, my body was already brimming with joyful anticipation. Like last night, Maximus took care of me first, and he didn't rush things either. With his head buried between my legs, his lips, tongue, and fingers made me forget everything around me. My body was sweaty, and the spot between my legs swollen and soppy from 3 orgasms before he got to his feet again. He dropped his towel, and my lips parted in surprise at the sight of his erection. My eyes moved up to the tattoos on his shoulders and chest, wondering why I had been so against tattoos before. Apart from the inked nemesis on his hand, the familia tattoos were the only words on his body. Born in blood, sworn in blood. I enter alive, and I'll leave dead. They were written in cursive on his left pec, and the head of a pit bull adorned his left bicep. The forest scene that sleeved his right arm, shoulder, and pec was my favorite, though they were all beautiful tattoos and made Maximus look magnificent. I couldn't imagine him without them. Realizing how long I'd stared, I quickly scooted up, and he climbed between my legs. He was still careful as he slid into me, but soon his motions became faster and harder. Afterward, he didn't immediately get up. He lay on his back beside me and stared up at the ceiling, his chest heaving. I lowered my hips after a while, hoping this fertile window would give me what I wanted. I slanted Maximus a look. His expression was unreadable, but I was fairly sure it wasn't happy. Would you mind if I came to your parents with you today? Maybe I can help in some way that doesn't involve handling any dogs. Maximus turned his head to me, surprise taking over his face. His amber eyes were even more breathtaking when they weren't swirling with darkness.
You sure? I thought you made plans with your family.
I'd never noticed it before, but when he said your family, his tone definitely changed. I knew his relationship with my family was as distant as mine with his. Again, it was my fault. Well, and Flavio wasn't fond of Maximus because of what had happened, and I'd never been brave enough to talk to him about it. Maybe we could go to them tomorrow for dinner? Maximus nodded. He regarded me as if he was trying to understand me. I gave him a small smile. Something changed last night, and I really wanted to make an effort with Maximus. If I got pregnant, I wanted our child to have parents who weren't mere strangers. I didn't want to get my hopes up that we might be able to create a marriage like my parents had. Maximus's eyes sought the clock on the wall, and he grimaced.
We'll be late if we don't hurry.
We both hurried toward our respective bathroom, and for the first time, I wondered if it wouldn't be nice to shower together after sex. I put on sturdy jeans and a sweater, plus a pair of old leather boots. I really wanted to help Maximus and his family in the shelter today, and pretty clothes wouldn't be practical. Maximus waited for me in front of the entrance door when I grabbed my raincoat. The weather was still quite unpredictable, and I didn't want to risk getting a cold. That probably wouldn't help with a possible pregnancy. Maximus, too, was dressed for a day of hard manual work. He wore blue jeans, a casual tight white t-shirt, a half-unbuttoned checkered flannel shirt, and a weathered brown-lined leather jacket. He held a cap in his hand, but put his on when I reached him.
Ready.
I wasn't sure why I did it, but I reached for his chin, brushing over the growing beard. This doesn't qualify as a 3-day stubble anymore. Are you growing a beard? I lowered my hand, embarrassed that I'd touched him like that, which didn't really make sense considering we had just slept with each other, but this felt more intimate in certain ways.
I'm not sure yet. I kind of like it. I'm not sure I'm the beard type.
It suits you, I said with a small smile, then quickly looked at my watch. We'll definitely be late. On our ride to the shelter, which took us roughly 30 minutes since the streets weren't jammed, I was nervous. As with Maximus, my relationship with his parents and brother had been distant. I hadn't really tried to see them outside of social functions or the obligatory duty visits on Christmas, Easter, and the respective birthdays. They would be surprised to see me today. Building new relationships still made me feel insecure, especially since we'd started off on the wrong foot. Growl and Primo were already outside, building a dog hut in a small barn with the doors open. They greeted us with a brief wave when we got out.
Mom's inside, preparing a second breakfast since you were too late for the first,
Primo said pointedly. I flushed. His gaze moved from me to Maximus, and he cocked an eyebrow. I hoped they didn't share any intimate details. Maximus waved him off.
Don't pretend you won't be hungry for a second breakfast in no time.
Growl tapped Primo's shoulder.
Let's focus on this. Stop teasing your brother.
Maximus touched my lower back and guided me into the house. Cora was hustling in the kitchen, making sandwiches and baking muffins. I'm not a great baker, but I reckon I can't do much wrong with chocolate muffins, right? She came toward me with a warm smile and pulled me into a hug. We're so happy that you could join us today. I'm sorry it took me so long, I whispered. She shook her head and squeezed my shoulder with an even warmer smile before she moved on to Maximus and cupped his face with a motherly look. A beard? Watching Cora treat Maximus with motherly tenderness reminded me of what Isa had said, that Maximus might also be dealing with trauma. I knew I was asking a lot from him without giving him much in return, and I promised myself to pay more attention to his little signs. He patted her hands and gently removed them.
I think your muffins are done.
She turned around to the oven and pulled out the muffin tin. None of the tiny cakes had risen from their molds. A glance at them told me they were way too dense. Cora sighed. This doesn't look good.
They don't have to look good. They just have to taste good,
Maximus said, taking out a muffin despite his mother's warning that it was hot. He took a bite, then chewed heavily before he gave his mother a grimace. Not good? She asked. He shook his head and swallowed in a way that suggested the dough was as dry as desert sand. Would you like me to bake chocolate cookies? I have a foolproof recipe with sea salt and macadamia nuts."
"I'm outside, helping my dad and brother,"
Maximus informed me, pausing as if there was more he wanted to say before he left. Cora helped me gather all the ingredients, and I whipped up the batter in 10 minutes. "Tea?" she asked. Together we settled at the kitchen table with 2 mugs of tea as we waited for the cookies to bake. Outside, a chainsaw roared up, followed by the screech of it biting into wood. The barking of dogs from upstairs reminded me that Maximus and his family always locked away their dogs when I came to visit. Now that I'd decided to become a more active part of the Trevisan family, I had to get used to their dogs. "You can let them out of their prison," I said with an embarrassed laugh. Cora seemed surprised by the suggestion. "I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. If I don't face my fears, they won't go away." Last night had shown me that. I knew it wasn't as easy as that, and certainly not something that happened from one day to the other, but I had to start somewhere. The oven beeped. I got up and removed the perfect chocolate cookies from the oven, setting them on the stove. "Are you sure?" Cora asked as she hovered in the doorway. "Yes." She disappeared, followed by the soft creak of the wooden floorboards upstairs. Excited barking rang out, followed by the sound of paws rushing down the stairs. My heart rate picked up, and I had to force myself to stand still and not let panic get the better of me. To my relief, the dogs barely spared me a glance. Instead, they all rushed out through the doggy door. I glanced out of the kitchen window to watch them greet Maximus excitedly. Especially the huge white dog Bacon almost ran him over in his excitement, which wasn't an easy feat. Maximus laughed, his face transforming to contentment. Then, as if he remembered that I was here with him, a frown took over his expression, and he looked toward me. He nodded toward the house as he said something to his father and brother, then he approached the front door. Shortly after he stepped into the kitchen, still with his shoes on. It always bothered me. I knew Cora and Growl didn't mind. They said the dogs used the same paws inside and outside, so dirt got in anyway. But I had been raised that shoes didn't belong inside the house.
"Are you okay?"
Maximus asked. Cora, who had been busy preparing coffee for a cookie and coffee break for the men, sent him a frustrated look. "Sarah asked me to release the dogs. She wants to get to know them." Getting to know them. Well, I would be happy if my body didn't automatically jump to flight mode whenever a dog came my way. I gave him a smile. It's true. I have to get used to them. I could tell by the warm look in Maximus's eyes how much he appreciated my willingness. Bacon came inside to be with Maximus and approached me curiously. His tail wagged lightly and he sniffed at my legs carefully.
"If you want, you can hold your hand out to him. It's a friendly way of saying hi to a dog."
I extended my hand, which shook slightly. Maximus came to my side. Bacon pressed up to him excitedly again before he sniffed my fingers with mild interest. I was surprised the other dogs hadn't joined him yet, but I assumed that Maximus had asked his brother and father to keep them outside. "I used to be terrified of Ryan's dogs. You remind me of my past self," Cora said. "I really can't imagine you being afraid of dogs," I said. I knew the story of how Growl had received Cora as a sort of gift by the crazy former Capo of the Camorra. I wasn't sure how they had made it work. It seemed like a difficult thing to overcome. Maximus reached past me for a cookie, and his arm brushed mine, sending a pleasant shiver through my body. Our gazes locked. Then he straightened and took a bite from the cookie. "Oh, and the potter's wheels and the oven arrived," Cora said. My eyes widened. I had completely forgotten that Maximus wanted to get them. "Potter's wheels?"
"I ordered 2, Maximus said with a shrug. "One for our apartment and one for here, in case you ever feel like doing pottery when we're visiting."
I stood on my tiptoes and pressed a kiss to his cheek. "Thank you." Cora quickly retreated and pretended to be busy with something in the pantry. Maximus put an arm around my back and kissed my lips as if it was the most natural thing in our marriage. And, surprisingly, it didn't feel strange at all.
"You're welcome."
He released me, and I had to resist the urge to touch my lips. "Do you want us to look at them?" 15 minutes later, Primo and Maximus were cursing as they were trying to put up the heavy pottery wheel in the barn. I knew a new round of curses would follow once they tried to put the second wheel on the bed of Maximus's truck. Something wet touched my hand. I jumped in surprise. Bacon stood beside me and had touched his nose to my palm. I swallowed, then held out my hand to him. He sniffed, then licked over it. I giggled. I'd have to remember to wash my hand later. But it was kind of a sweet gesture of the dog, almost as if he was trying to become my friend. I lightly patted his back, how Maximus had shown me, and Bacon sat down beside me. Well, he planted his butt right on top of my boot and pressed his side against my leg.
If he gets too heavy, just shove him away. I think he's taking a shining to you,
Maximus said as he entered the kitchen followed by his brother.
Just wait until he prefers her and doesn't let you get into bed with her,
Primo said with a laugh. A look passed between Maximus and I. We still didn't share a bed, but maybe it was time to change that.
Chapter 19. Maximus. Sarah came into the kitchen still in her nightgown. Since her fertile days 2 weeks ago, we hadn't had sex again, but I had thought about it often. Having seen Sarah's passionate side, and knowing I could bring it out had definitely changed how I saw her, how I allowed myself to see her. But I hadn't made a move towards Sarah, and she hadn't approached me either. Maybe for her the sex had really only been about the baby, even if she'd enjoyed it. She hadn't faked enjoying it. She'd been too wet for that. One look at her face told me she didn't have good news.
I'm not pregnant. I got my period today.
Maybe next time, I said. Part of me wasn't sad. I definitely wanted to have sex with Sarah again, and this gave me the opportunity, no matter how sad of a reality it was that my wife only wanted me close for reproduction. Sarah released a small sigh and sank down across from me.
Maybe 2 times wasn't enough. The fertile window can be up to 4 days long. Next time we should give it more attempts.
Of course, I said. She wouldn't have to convince me to sleep more often with her. Now that she enjoyed it, I wouldn't mind having sex every day. Fuck, I wanted to fuck her now. She looked absolutely gorgeous with her bed hair and the thin silk nightgown. But unless something changed drastically, my hand would have to do the job until Sarah gave the go again in 2 weeks. I don't have to work today, I said. Do you want to spend the day together? Surprise crossed her face.
Sure.
Then she grimaced.
I'm supposed to meet with Greta for lunch.
Greta and Sarah had started doing things together, and they seemed to get along quite well. I could ask Amo to join us. Then we could do a double date. Sarah blinked at me.
That would be our first public date.
I nodded. We hadn't gone out as a couple yet, except for the social functions we were forced to attend. We hadn't even shared a nice dinner yet. Movie nights was our go-to date night. It didn't require us to talk and possibly encounter any awkwardness. Maybe it was a good thing to start as a double date, so things couldn't get awkward. I gave Amo a call, and we decided to make a couple's weekend at the holiday house of Amo's family in the Hamptons. Since Amo was my boss too, he could tell me to take another day off. I didn't mind having the entire weekend for Sarah. Sarah and I quickly packed our bags before we headed out. In the car, I turned up the music to my favorite Metallica album, Kill 'Em All. The first chords of Hit the Lights came on. Sarah slanted me a look.
What is it?
She asked. My eyebrows climbed my forehead. Metallica.
Oh, I only know Nothing Else Matters from them. This piece is new to me.
I shook my head. Then you don't know their best work. I often listen to them when I work and in the car. I like other music too, but they are my staple. I fell silent. Sarah watched me with a small smile. If you don't like it, we can switch to something you enjoy, I said with a shrug.
No, I think it's nice to get to know this part of you.
What's your favorite music? Sarah flushed.
You'll laugh.
I won't.
Taylor Swift. I love her music.
It fits you. I didn't expect you to listen to heavy metal or grunge. Sarah let out a small laugh. The sound was beautiful, and when her